All right, Jason Sutton, very warm welcome back in the podcast. You were on a long time ago. It's nearly like 2 years now. So I've
Gosh.
been really, really eager to get you back on because so much has happened for you professionally. Obviously, kind of our relationship has developed in those 2 years. We've kind of got a lot closer in terms of what we teach, what we're learning. So this is just going to be a real, real fun one for me to have you on here. And the last time you were on, we focused more on personal development and so forth. And I really wanted to get you back on because I want to talk about the technical aspects of things. Now, I've seen you in person coaching, which is a fantastic experience, but I've also seen over the last year your players starting to get a little bit more notoriety, starting to kind of move up on those circuits, and that's been fantastic to see you develop that way. And I just thought it'd be a great way to get you on, get into the technical side of things, the way your brain works, how you see things, because a lot of your players, we have some idiosyncratic actions, which I think are going to help club golfers,
Yeah.
help coaches. But let's start off with what's been going on recently in the last couple of weeks with yourself, because we've had some news, some good news. So if you want to explain to the listeners just that good news you've heard in the last couple of weeks and the exciting things you have coming up in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months.
Well, thanks for having me back on. I was beginning to wonder whether we are going to get this done and whether I pissed you off or something. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're
But
good.
yeah, no, I'm just messing with you. No, it's been great to our relationship has grown, and I'm living vicariously through your travels and your experiences with other top coaches. So we're kind of learning from each other, which is awesome. So thanks for having me back on. But you can tell them the news. It's officially out today. But you
Okay.
you can drop
All
the
right. So,
award.
so your area is the Carolinas PGA. That's where you're
The
attached to.
section. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
section.
section. Yeah.
And they have certain awards that most sections do every year. And one of those awards is Coach of the Year, and the other one is Club Professional of the Year. And this year, you have actually won the Club Professional Award, which is,
Right.
I think, one of the first times, if not the first time, that's happened to a person who's a full-time coach. And
Yes.
you've also, on top of that, or previous to that, been nominated to actually go speak at the Top 100 Summit, and that's coming up soon. So
Yeah.
a lot of nice recognition. And we talked a little bit before the show started. Like, we don't really do this for the awards, but when you put as much of yourself into your craft, into helping people develop, like the hours, the energy, the money, the intellect, it's nice to get that recognition. So, how do you feel about that award, first off, for your section? And then, obviously, with the top
Yeah.
100 coming up, how do you feel about that too?
Yeah, it's a huge honor to win Golf Professional of the Year because, like you said, it's not. Uh, it was definitely not on my bingo card, as we say,
Okay.
because it's usually a director of golf or a head professional that wins it. But I got to give a lot of thanks to some of my colleagues that one nominated me, some other teachers that sort of recognize that, a teaching professional that's sort of poured into the section for as long as I have, because it's not just about this year, it's about my entire career or nearly 20 some years in the section of the stuff that I've done, whether it's, providing educational opportunities, all the workshops that I've done over the years, presenting, mentoring that we've talked about a lot, going back to the other podcast and things and, me helping you out in your career and so many other people. That's really the gist of it. And it's nice. And I'm really proud of our section for sort of, we call breaking the glass ceiling of being the first. I'm not here to make history, but yeah, it was pretty cool because I won the Strauss Award last year. I won Teacher of the Year and then the Horton Smith Award a few years ago. So I think I'm done with the awards, right? This is kind of the pinnacle
You're gonna have to make up
of,
a new one next year, man.
yeah, no, it's just I was like, I mean, I really when I got the call, I was really really excited. I knew I had a chance, but didn't know if it would actually happen. Um, yeah, it's just really really grateful to represent my section, which I think is the best section in the country. We're the largest section in the country, North Carolina, South Carolina. So it's incredible. I mean, I think I told you before we started recording. I was in tears, at some point after hearing about it, because you just get this flood of emotion of, not that we want to be win awards like you said, but it's nice to be recognized for all the stuff that we've been through, the failures and the successes. And just for me, it's just having a servant attitude and helping other people, which has been my mindset for, since I got into this section and really into the business. So yeah, it's super cool. Um, like we talked about earlier, like now I'm like trying to figure out like what am I going to say in my speech? Like I get ahead of myself. But as far as the top 100, yeah, that another one that was not on my radar. It's an honor to get to present next week down in Florida. I'm going to do some putting stuff. We're doing it all outdoors this year, which is going to be really cool. Like kind of a live lesson slash application focused seminars. So I think that's going to be really really good. So yeah, another just bucket list that you don't ask for, you just get lucky. And um, it's been a heck of a year. I mean, it's like I told this I think to somebody the other day. I thought I was talking to Jason Bellotti, my Streezy guy, and one of my business partners. We did a podcast late last year. And we were talking about not so much resolutions, but just goals or like what we would like to accomplish in 2024. And it's just amazing when you put these things out into the universe and you have a sort of a direction that you're moving in, whether it's just getting better at whatever you're doing, that good things start to happen. It's just when I found out the news about the golf professional of the year, I called Jason and I was like, dude, you're not going to believe this. And pretty much everything we talked about has come to fruition. Like it's manifested itself. And I don't know. I'm blown away. I mean, I feel like I don't deserve it. My imposter syndrome kicks in and goes, what's going on? But also it makes you appreciate all the things that a lot of people have done for me along the way, which is the list is long. And then for me, it motivates me to do more, right? It's like, I remember after I got on the top 100 list, one, I was like super excited, but then I'm like, okay, now I've got to validate. And so I'm like, you got to have that second win. Like you got to
Yeah.
validate yourself and go, all
Second
right,
major is always the hardest.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Then you're like, okay, now I got to kind of prove myself. So that's always what gets me out of bed in the morning. And so now it's like, I mean, I'm not that old. So it's like, what am I going to do next? So I'm excited. I'm excited for the future.
Yeah, I think we were texting when you told me about that a couple of days ago, and I said to you, to me, in looking at your development, your career over the last couple of years, with said with no disrespect to what you had achieved to this point, I said to you, for me, I'm just getting that vibe that you're nearly just getting onto like the first or second rung of a really tall ladder. You know what I mean? And
I
that
hope
just
so.
that momentum is just starting to, and it's great for other coaches. I remember texting Mark Blackburn a couple of years ago after he won for PGA Coach of the
National.
Year. Yeah,
Yep.
national. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I said to him, I just want to thank you for doing it the right way. It's not glitz, it's not glamour. You just do the hard work. And when other coaches see that and they go, you know what, I can do this and I can do it the right way. I don't need to be, maybe displaying things or kind of faking things in
Sure.
a one. I can put in the hard yards, hard graft, and it will come around. It'll be great recognition. And we must also mention, obviously, a good friend of ours, Sean Kennedy, also
Yeah.
won an award for in your section. So I think he won
Yeah.
coach of the year,
Teacher of the year. Yeah.
teacher
I
of the
mean,
year. Yeah.
it's just, it's so cool because again, like he should have won years ago. I mean,
Hmm.
he's just a fantastic coach, but a lot of times, the way these things work and whether you don't sell yourself enough in the application, we've
Hmm.
kind of gotten onto in the last few years. I'm like, man, you deserve this award. Let's get you in there. And so excited that he won. And then my boss, Eric Schultz, won Strauss-Ball Award, which is what won last year. So it's gonna be a really fun celebration at the awards dinner with
Yeah.
so many of like my colleagues and mentors. And yeah, it's funny how things work. But I mean, it's like I just hope, the more I think about this, again, being the first teaching professional to win the award in our section, I don't know about the other sections, but hopefully this inspires other young teaching professionals to do more and to give more, and kind of opens doors that this is possible, because I never ever thought it was possible that I could win this award until like my friend Robbie Fritz nominated me a couple of years ago and sort of broke it down for me and was very, very nice to say that. And then here it is, and I'm still shocked. I still can't believe it.
Yeah. So some might say the reason Sean won this year was because he was on the show earlier on Shamrocks and
I
Shanks.
mean,
But I don't
100%.
know whether there's truth to that or not. We're just,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll just put that out
I
there.
can't wait after my second time on the show. What's going to
Uh,
happen?
yeah, absolutely. You'll be at Augusta next year.
Yeah, let's
Um,
hope.
all right. So obviously, you know the show. You're familiar with the pattern of the format. We kind of go first half. How can we help those club players with your
Hmm.
information, your knowledge? So let's go there first, and then let's jump into the your players. And I think there's going to be a show where everybody's going to learn from every section, which is great. That's the ideal goal. So let's get straight into what's happened over, say, the last year in golf instruction. There's been a lot of new information, or maybe different ways of phrasing new information. Let's put it that way. Different
Hmm.
perspectives put out into the golf coaching atmosphere. Um, what's something that you've kind of been very, or it's piqued your interest this year, or something that maybe you've learned or had to look at in a different way? And I know you got the smart to move plate, so you've kind of
Right.
gone a little bit down that route. So maybe just
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how you found the year from a learning or investigative golf coaching side.
Yeah. I mean, we've been studying ground reaction forces for a long time, right? I mean, and it's cool to have, and I had body track in the past, which was fine for that time. But smart to move has been a really good measuring device for me. And a lot of times when you start adding technology to your teaching, a lot of times the amateurs or the club players think that that's too technical for me or that's not for me. But I've found it to be super helpful for even my members and all levels, all skill levels, to where you can get them on the plates. And it again, it's up to the coach to give that player and the level of that player and what you think they can handle the information and what not to give them, right? It's like you can
Mhm.
overwhelm them with a lot of graphs and a lot of different things with the forces that it measures, but I can put an average golfer on there and just show them sort of the biofeedback of like where the pressure is at setup or how they're moving and watch the traces and do something really, really simple like that and
Mhm.
help them immediately. So it's it's been good. I mean, I've got a great relationship with the Smart to Move guys. I'm actually having Dr. Tyler on my podcast in a couple of days
Oh,
to
great.
kind of dig into it. But that's probably been the biggest thing. I mean, there's so many things. We're always learning, right? I mean, gosh, I could go down so many different rabbit holes. Um, my philosophy, I wouldn't say has changed much. It's just trying to figure out new ways to get people to change and improve is what I'm always trying to do.
Mhm.
And it never, I know this is for the club golfer, so it never ceases to amaze me of how important intention is in golf. And you could apply that to all parts of the game. But let's just say full swing. Um, Whether you're trying to make some kind of swing change or some kind of pattern change or whatever it is your goal is in that lesson, is getting them to change their mindset on whatever they're trying to picture as far as the shot shape or the target. I mean, that is going to always precede force and movement. So, I mean, I can't explain how important that is because most people are just thinking about a thousand different things and they don't really have an intent or a plan on really what they're trying to get the golf ball to do and then kind of working themselves back from that. So, I mean, that's a broad sort of spectrum, but
Mhm.
it seems so simple, but I've seen it help and change the dynamic of a lesson that I'm giving to an average golfer or one of my members in a heartbeat just because of changing their mindset or changing their intent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think changing the understanding of what they perceive they should be doing
Yeah,
obviously is going to change.
concepts, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, intent,
huge.
concept. I mean, all these are sort of, words that we use a lot, but I mean, until you sort of piece those things together, I think making a movement change or a, different feel or a pattern, it always has to start with intent.
Mhm. When you've seen and you've used these plates,
Hmm.
What's the big challenge you've seen in the club golfers more predominantly? Is it still, when you're looking at how they move, a rotational issue? Is it more of a lateral side to side issue? What's the kind of fault that you've seen popping up again and again now that you have access to the actual data versus the 2D perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it's two things. One is setup, because I see my average golfers or just golfers in general, even
Mm,
good players, struggle with where the pressure is with toe versus heel,
okay.
right? So I like to see the pressure. I see most of them. I see either they get too far from the ball and then they're too much out in over their skis, as Scott Calx would say,
Yeah.
um, too much in their toes, as opposed to I like to see them just behind the balls of their feet, right? So they kind of get some balance and give themselves an opportunity to move.
Hmm.
And then laterally, I see most players that struggle with ball striking have too much pressure in their trail side at address. So we know that, again, the swing starts before the club moves, as we've
Hmm.
learned from a lot of smart people like James Lights. So the best players that I see, they always have a little pressure in that lead side, whether it's a trigger move to kind of push into that lead side before the swing starts, or they're already a little bit in that lead side. So that's where when I put the picture up, I use a big TV with the plates, and I'll just put their feet up, and I'm like, all right, just stand on it, move around a little bit. They'll start to notice that what they felt like maybe was 50-50 was like 65-70 on the right side or trail
Hmm.
side. And I was like, well, let's try to even that out. So it gives them some awareness of where they're starting. So that's a huge part of it. And I like to see, then we can kind of get into the technical side here a little bit as far as just
Yeah.
setup stuff, but I like to see the armpits over the balls of the feet. Okay. And everybody's different with the length of their legs and their torso and how tall they are and their arm length and all that. But that's a pretty good starting point. So I see when I say tipped over, typically they're out in their toes and I'll put them on the plates and it's usually validated. I can see it on video pretty quick, but their armpits get out onto their toes too soon or too much. So that would be kind of setup stuff.
And
And
what
then,
what what do you see happens from those positions? What
yeah,
does
yeah.
that cause?
Right. So you'll see a decent amount of sort of linear movement in the backstroke where
Mhm.
the hips will shift to the right and maybe they don't have enough rotation.
Okay.
Um, it's hard to explain, but they just don't move efficiently from that position, right?
Because they're not giving
So
themselves that platform to move from when they're, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we don't have to understand all the details of why things happen, but it's just
Hmm.
like I see this pattern every time and it's like the outcome is typically not good.
Yeah.
So once we get them set up in those, and again, this is talking about ball on the ground stuff, right? I mean, with
Absolutely.
driver, it might be more
Yeah.
50-50 with the pressure. But for the most part, again, this affects like sweet spot control. You see people that are hitting it out of the heel too much. You'll see trail arm extension too early, things that cause shanking. These can all be easily fixed if you get their pressure in the right place
Mhm.
at the start. As far as like swing stuff that I'm seeing, probably decent amount of lateral shift into the trail side, but not enough rotation and not enough verticals, right, into the trail side. And I'll see like what Smart to Move talks about is like the point of contact with each foot is very, very important, right? So when they get into their trail side, when I say loaded properly, then that center of pressure is going to be somewhere in the middle of the foot to even slightly towards the heel a lot of times
Okay.
in a good swing
Yeah.
in players that struggle or average golfers, it'll kind of hang in the toe, in the right toe at the top of the backswing, which makes it difficult to start to move pressure in one. It makes it difficult to push in the right direction. I call that line of pressure, and also it makes it difficult to rotate. Right? I always say the toes are great for jumping, but not real good for rotating. Right? So
100%.
that trail, I'm pretty fanatical with how they load that trail foot, where they don't get on the outside of the trail foot, but they just have a balanced or sort of stability aspect to that trail side or the trail foot as they load. And of course, they have to have some rotation, right? So the pelvis is going to move a certain way. That trail hip is going to turn up and back. which kind of creates that, right? It's like
Mhm.
you can make them aware a lot of times of the resultant place that the pressure is and then how they get there, right? So it's like there's a difference. Like you can tell somebody to turn into their right heel, but it might not be the correct way, right? They might just like they might just like rock back into their heels. We want them to get there by the proper sequence of, the trail hip turning and the torso rotating and, the proper shoulder tilts and all that stuff that we enjoy. But that's a big one. So that trail side loading properly is good because then they can actually move into the lead side so that the average golfers don't get enough lateral into that lead side soon enough. If sometimes
100%.
they'll do it, yeah, it's like super late, right?
Hmm.
And then which creates less of an ability to use the verticals, right? So that's the big thing for me that I've learned with Smart to Move is how crucial that lead foot is in pushing up, which creates that AP force, which is the rotational aspect of the golf swing, right? It's the
Hmm.
anterior, posterior. So it's like that. You see me on my Instagram videos using the force pedal. Give them a little
Hmm.
shout out. It's just a little spongy ball that goes under the lead ball of the foot. And you teach people that you have to start pushing down into that lead foot way super early in the backswing,
Yeah.
right? So there's a timing aspect of when the verticals are being applied, and ground is reacting. That's why they call it ground reaction forces. You have to push into the ground before the ground can push back, right?
Yeah.
So when we push into that lead foot, I get people they look at me with three heads when I say I need you to stand up sooner as opposed to staying down a lot of times.
I mean, told to stay down all their life, but it's
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Keep your head down. I mean, and there's some people that obviously are going to, come out of their posture, the dynamic posture. But for the most part, I get people to stand up sooner and rotate. And something I learned from John Tattersall is that, the club's pulling us towards the floor, right? So, I mean, there's 70 pounds of pressure that club is pulling us towards the ground. It's our job to get it out of the ground with our body, and it starts with our feet, right? So it's our connection to the ground with our feet is huge. So, that's a big thing that I work on, not just with the, low handicappers or my professionals, is a lot of times is getting people to learn what creates that lead side rotation. And most of it's the verticals. Like you're pushing up with that lead side, and I show them like, hey, you got to push from the left ball of the foot, which, why does every good player roll their ankle on their finish? Looks like they're breaking their ankles, right?
Hmm.
They're not doing that on purpose. That's just so that lead knee and the lead hip can kind of get out of the way. And they don't, and why do the long drivers step back,
Yeah.
right? That's all vertical and rotational force that they're applying to the ground. So yeah, those are some of the things that I see that, good players do versus the average golfers.
So for those club players, because we were using a few different terms in there, a bit AP force, bit of verticals. So if we're saying, okay, well, why do you want me to push? Why am I pushing off my left foot? Why you tell me to do that? It really is the corresponding movements that creates. So when we're pushing off that lead side, that lead foot earlier in the swing, that vertical push off the ground creates a little bit more rotation in that lead side. The more
Right.
rotation creates a little bit of that stretch between the hand where the hands are, and creates a little bit more speed, a little bit more opening through. So all these
Yeah.
nice things start happening because of what we're working through on that lead foot. And a good friend of ours, Mark Bull, will always comment when you see someone with poor ground reaction forces, look to the left or the lead, excuse me, heel and foot first to see if
Yeah.
there's any issues there and how they're working through that side. So that's
Totally
really
agree.
fascinating stuff in terms of that. And, you know, it's great that you have that system where you can put people on that, put them up on the screen, and we can match the movement with the visual. They're getting
Yeah.
the, oh, okay, well, so when I feel like I'm this, that's actually neutral, let's say. And when I feel like I'm this, okay, that's there. And then when I'm pushing here, I need to feel great, fantastic. So you're getting, I think it's important that we get that 3D feedback so we know what we're doing with the help of the player and the visual and combo those two things together, which is fantastic.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, we're not saying you got to have like a perfectly straight left leg at impact.
No.
Like not all players do, but there has to be some pushing. If not, we start moving into the lead side and we keep going, right? There's no
Hmm.
braking system, right? Which causes a lot of the energy to get out to the club. I mean, all these little things are sort of that down the chain stuff really helps. Everybody comes to us and wants to do what they want to swing faster and hit it farther. and again, I'm not trying to like say we have to have a lot more speed to play better golf all the time. You still have to be able to hit it out of the center of the club face and be able to control your golf ball. But
Mhm.
these are the things that help the body move to, I think, improve impact and then, help you to hit it more solid because guys or ladies are hitting it fat or thin because of a lot of things they're trying to do, which is stay down too long or, they're trying to open up, but they don't really know how to do it properly.
For sure, for sure.
Mm.
From a student perspective, and this is kind of a way that they could maybe help themselves in lessons. So anybody getting lessons right now, and as they go into a lesson, what's something that you've seen this year in terms of something that a student did you hadn't seen before, or some way they acted, or some action they took, even away from the lesson tee that you were like, damn, if I could email all my students to do this, this would either be, and it can be both ways. It can be, that would be amazing, or damn, this student did this. And I was like, never do that again. That is, please don't do that again.
Oh
Any,
man.
any thoughts around that?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, because everybody's an individual, right? I mean, we see something different because
Mm,
we're dealing with different personalities, body types. I would just say because we get so many students that come to us confused, right? And not to badmouth any other coaches because everybody's trying their best and giving them what they think they need,
absolutely.
but a lot of times they get the wrong prescription or on their own, a self-sabotage by either watching a video that probably was a great video on YouTube or Instagram that maybe wasn't applicable to their problem or what they needed. I think, if I had to email everybody, it's like just figure out your why, right? It's like, okay, when you say you're going to do this, like I had a student today, it was a great example. I 22 handicapper, first time I've ever seen him. And he told me that, well, this previous coach that he had or whatever is telling me I needed to rotate more and this and that. And I was like, okay, I'm in my head, I'm going, yeah, that's probably what you need to do. You're not, he thought he was limited to how he was going to be able to swing. And I changed something different, which was he was super steep. He went from like 7 or 8 left with his club path, hitting kind of weak fades and pulls in 30 minutes. Well, I got him to like 4 or 5 to the right, and he was hitting draws and like little pull draws, which was great because he picked up distance. And he repeated back to me, he's like, yeah, this certain thing in the backswing was exactly or pretty close to like how I used to swing. I'm like, okay, well that's where we need to be clearly. And he was like, he thought I was a magician or something. I'm like, no, I'm just I mean, it takes some layers to kind of, ask the proper questions and get the right answers to like what that player is going to do because everybody's different.
Hmm.
And he, it kind of changed his world as far as like his perspective on what he really needed to do. So it's like you've got to figure out the why when you're making a change, right? It's not just
Yeah.
because it looks like a tour player or it looks like something because they're average golfers have their own lens of like what they think a golf swing should look like, which is different than my lens, different than your lens because we've got more knowledge of how to put the pieces together for each player, right? So that's the
Hmm.
that's the tricky part about our job. But I think when the average golfer can get some clarity and say, all right, because this guy, he hadn't really had that many lessons, which was kind of interesting. I always ask that question is like, have you had lessons? And when they say they haven't had that many lessons, I always got to talk them through sort of the process of like, all right, we've got to feel uncomfortable because change is uncomfortable. You've got to be able to embrace that. And he told me, he's like, I'm cool to do that as long as I know that this is going to make me better.
Yeah.
Right. And that as soon as we did that, and then we were on the same page and then we were off and running. And here he is hitting draws 30 minutes later, which is doesn't always happen, right? But it's cool when it does.
Yeah.
Right.
It's nice.
So yeah, so he has a perfect understanding and some clarity of what his changes are, why, and then where's that going to take me, right? Because that's going to help him to reach his goal of whatever, getting to a 15.
Mhm.
Right. So it's like that's the thing. I think if you got and you got to dig deep with that. I think students out there need to do a better job of asking better questions
Yeah.
from the coach.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like it's our job to like give you the information, but we can't just we do our best to pull out the information that you have. And a lot of people don't know how to articulate what they're trying to do, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
fair. It'd just be like us trying to learn another sport or another skill. If you don't have any knowledge of it, then that's fine. But when you have all this other stuff that sort of is clogging up uh, your goal of like getting better, and it's the wrong stuff,
Yeah.
then we're trying to pull that out and like push it to the side and say, okay, well, this is really the couple things that we need to do because this is what's going to happen, and this is
Hmm.
why. And then we've got the measurement devices to like show them like he's super, this guy was super into the data. So I'm like, you don't need to know all this stuff. I just basically gave him a 5 minute tutorial on ball flight. So he understood D plane fairly well in the first 5 minutes of the lesson. He goes, this is perfect. Like, so I need to make that number go over here. I'm like, yeah. So this is going to measure our feel. Cause I told him feel and real is a very long bridge sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to make that bridge a little smaller for you. And he got it really quick. And he was excited. He's like, man, I went from -7 to +4, and look what my golf ball's doing. And now I sort of understand why, and this is what I need to feel. And that's a successful golf lesson, right? So I don't know if that
Yeah. No,
answered the
absolutely.
question in a
No,
long-winded
absolutely.
way, but yeah, we can go
I
down that.
think it's not in a negative way. It's not putting the onus back on the customers, so to speak. But I'm always looking at ways. Okay, well, I know you work the same way. When somebody comes to me, this is a team effort. We're
Yeah,
trying to attain the
100%.
same goal here. You
Yeah.
do well, I do well. Everybody does well. We're all happy. So how can we all work to make this better? And I think definitely players coming in and going, okay, why? Asking, wanting to understand it. I think we thrive off that as coaches. If you get inquisitive with me, I love it, right? And
Yeah,
I had a player this
100%.
year, same situation as you, just maybe smaller when you were talking about the ball flight laws, where we had a lesson and he'd never heard of them, wasn't aware of them, and we didn't go through the whole lot of them. We just
No, just
worked on
path
a
face.
specific one,
Yeah, I mean,
and
that's a
then the
good
next
place to
section,
start.
next session he came back. He goes, I want to show you something. And he started off the lesson for the first 10 minutes and went through all the ball flight laws. He'd gone off and studied them because he wanted to learn and he
Love
wanted,
that
and
guy.
that's the first time I've seen someone do that, actively go away and learn off their own accord.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought that was really, really fantastic. And, then he came back and he had a great understanding. And I was like, hey, so you see this data tile here? And he's like, yeah, I know exactly what that would do that to that. Beautiful. And now
Yeah.
that makes me more energized. So it's always interesting talking to coaches about those students that they see that, do those fun things outside of it or just put that little bit of extra effort in. And then I can tell you this, if you're a student listening to this, if you do that, we're so much more in. Like we're already fully in. But if you do that too, like we'll go above and beyond to help players that are going above and beyond to help themselves.
Yeah, because we have plenty of players that come in thinking they know more than the coach. All right.
Never happened to me.
Right. I mean, it's like and those are the roadblocks we deal with.
Yeah.
I always say, you can be an open-minded learner, or you can be a dirt in a cup. Right. From the old Zen philosopher analogy. But I mean, so yeah, it's like you got to be open-minded. And hey, we all make bad calls. I've made them, you've made them. I mean, it happens, but
Yeah.
we're going to work through it together because I've got plenty of other tools in the toolbox. As long as we know the direction we're going, we're going to figure it out eventually. So it's the ones that come in that want to argue with you. Like, are you sure this is right? I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, this is like my 32nd year of trying this stuff. I mean, I didn't just make it up, right? It's like,
Yeah. I am
like, yeah,
trying
I'm
to
pretty
get you
sure.
there. Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah, it was funny. Not to go off on too many tangents, as you know. But yeah, he came in. He didn't have a clue who I was or my reputation or whatever, which
Hmm.
is fine. And he saw my logo or whatever. He goes, "So what makes you the guru?" I'm like, "That is a fantastic question."
How long have we got?
Right? It was cool. Like we had a great time. So it was
Nice.
yeah, 30 minutes of like talking and 30 minutes of actually helping them. And so yeah. All
Well,
right.
I think what some people don't understand too, about learning golf is it's not like you get a new swing and suddenly the old motor pattern that existed just dissipates and disappears.
Right.
It's you're putting layers upon layers upon layers. So what you learn first becomes the baseline, and then you're supplementing new movements on top of that.
Yep.
Right? It just doesn't. So sometimes, as you mentioned earlier on, sometimes the best way is for us as coaches, you've just got too much shit supplemented on top of what you was originally pretty damn good. So
Right.
sometimes it's about just stripping that shit away that you've been told that just isn't true. Um, and getting to the root and go, okay, well, you know what? That base thing you had was pretty decent, but let's go this route now. And let's go the right way and we'll assess and whether it's like using, force plates, whether it's using TrackMan, whether it's using 3D,
Yeah.
whatever. And let's put a plan in place. And I think then you have the buy-in from the player because they know you're not full of shit, which is obviously very, very important.
Yeah. Presence, as we talked about before. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's establishing,
Um,
because we are the experts. It's just, we don't have to
yeah.
tell them everything we know, but we need to get reasonable results fairly quickly to get that buy-in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to I don't know whether we mentioned this at the start, but I did get the chance to hang out with you last year. It is now. God, time flies, doesn't it?
It has.
And it was you organized some nice Irish rainy weather for me, which I really, really
I
appreciated.
know.
And my wife did too.
I'm
That was
not
our kind of
normally
like,
like that.
yeah, that's a kind of like semi honeymoon. Um, but I was really, really impressed with the way you went around helping your players. Because as coaches, or I know myself when I go to watch other coaches, my brain's going, right? And I'm thinking, I would do
Sure.
this, I would do that. And there was some big changes I would have made to some players, and you didn't do that. You worked around it and helped them, and it was really, really good. Like I really enjoyed the time. Probably the most interesting aspect was the putting. And just because of the way I've learned and the way my development education has gone, I haven't really spent a
Hmm.
whole lot of time on putting. Um, so I was really interested in that and a lot of the concepts that you were talking about, a little bit like aiming kind of points and all these break points and discussions. So it was really good, very educational. Um, can we give the listeners an overall understanding of what your process is like in assessing putting and some principles that you work on that they could take to the putting green themselves, maybe help themselves in learning or assessing their own stroke in action?
Yeah. So we're still in the
We're
player
we're still on the club golfers side
section.
of
Yeah. The
things,
club
yeah.
go. Okay. Yeah.
And then we're
So
gonna well, what we can do is say, okay, let's start off with how would you or what would you recommend club players look at when looking or
yeah.
assessing their own strokes? Because a lot of them will default to the stroke. Oh, I'm putting shit. What's wrong with my stroke? Might not
Yeah.
be the stroke. So maybe, ways to assess that first. And then we'll just creep nicely after that into the technical side of things, into the coaching side of things, and talk about. I know you're going to present on this at the top 100, so maybe
Right.
we might slide into that, whatever you want to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
there.
yeah. I'll kind of give the cliff notes, which again, it always surprises my members or the amateur golfers when they come to see me. I'll give them a nice full swing lesson. You got 10 minutes left, and they're like, "Oh, can you look at my putting?" I'm like, "Sure," but I mean, not. I mean, what are we really
Yeah,
doing, right? It's like, yeah,
like in
like, well,
glance.
how long should I book? And I'm like, well, when a tour player comes to see me or like a really competitive player, like it's a minimum of 2 hours, if
Mhm.
not three, if we're really going to do it right. So they look at me like a little bit crazy, but clearly you've got to adapt, and I've got to give a lot of 30-minute to half or to hour putting lessons. So I think most of the average golfers spend too much time on their stroke and not enough time on break prediction and or just picturing the the path of the ball or the putt
Okay.
and or working on their touch, right? So
Right.
I break my coaching into basically what I call three skill buckets. Like one is the stroke. We can call I use like a calibration station, which is whether it's a Visio mat or whatever training aid you prefer. I like the Visio mat. As far as like a start line piece ish, like that, we'd call that stroke mechanics. And then skill bucket two would be more the feel and touch and what I call picture stuff. And I think most golfers should spend more time in that skill bucket two than skill bucket one. Not that the stroke pattern and all that isn't important, because it is, but I think you can improve a lot faster if one, you work on your touch, and two, you work on your green reading. So I always start, and I'll give some application here, I promise. So I always start a lesson, if I have a little bit of time, if we have more than 10 minutes, with just a simple drill with can you stop the ball where you want to stop it, right? So I'll throw a poker chip out on the green, or put a ball mark on the green or something, and I'll start them out at like 6 feet, and then I'll go to like 15 feet, and then I'll go to like 30 feet, and I'll move around the green a little bit to give them different breaks in different situations and change the environment and just sort of sit back and watch for patterns, right? So are they missing it low and short? Are they missing it high? What's going on? How tight is that cluster of 4 or 5 balls that I give them? Um, I'm a big fan of doing more drills without an actual golf hole than with the hole. So I use ghost
Interesting.
holes. Yeah, I use again just putting to a tee or whatever. I like the poker chip because you can see it pretty easily, even when you're far away. And it's something I learned from John Graham years ago, one of my good friends and mentors in putting. But everything basically is built backwards, right? So I call it reverse engineering the problem. So I'll get people to do that, and they really don't know what they're doing aside from like I'm just stop the ball here, stop the ball here, and then I say, okay, well that's not actually the hole. That's just where the ball would end up if the hole disappeared, right? So then we sort of build that picture backwards and start to test their green reading. So I'll throw a ghost hole out there. I'll even sometimes have them place the hole where they think the hole should be, which totally, did I do that with you,
You
with
did,
my
yeah. That
guy?
was one of the ones I
Yeah.
loved. Yeah,
So that's the
yeah,
one that I'm kind of working on the language to like explain this to people because I've seen them put it in various positions because they don't understand the instructions.
yeah.
But basically, it's if the hole was in the way on the way to the
The
poker
poker
chip,
chip. Yeah.
yeah, that's where the hole should be. And that's, but so also we're getting some insight into the player's perspective of how they see the putt, right? So I
Mm,
always say so much of great putters are very observant and they're very visual because they have a good picture of, I mean, we've heard it all the way back to like Tiger Woods, picture, putt to the picture. Like, what does
yeah.
that mean? Well, he's seeing, and Jack Nicklaus even said, I see a movie. I don't pull the trigger until the movie's finished, right? So all these things kind of lead us to clues of what the successful putters always did, regardless of their stroke type. I think probably 80% of poor putting or with the average golfer, they're just trying to 3 putt or 4 putt less, right? It's like not always about making more putts. It's like, can we have, some more 3 putt avoidance? So touch is a great place to start.
Okay.
And then we kind of build the picture backwards. And like what you were talking about is depending on the level of player, I'll build that picture back with some ball marks or some lines and so forth to where the last third of the putt I think is super, super important. Something I learned from Mark Sweeney from Aim Point years ago was what we call drop point, which is the point on the curve that's halfway in between the apex of the putt and the hole and the entry point. So even what we found is even when the player knows the exact answer of like where they think the ball needs to start, where the aim point is, and so forth, that a lot of times in their head they will picture too much curve. So that's why you see a lot of good players will actually miss it high a lot of times when they're putting poorly because they're not seeing the curve flat enough in that last third, part of the putt. So I actually
Yeah.
there's a way that you can figure that out, which I can't really explain on the podcast probably, but you can put that in. I'll put a ball mark in there, and so we start experimenting on what players how their awareness is and how they react to the picture. So I'll put the entire anatomy of a putt out there, which would be like start line, apex, drop point, entry point, intent, and we'll just mess around with it, and then I'll start taking things away, right? And then you start measuring and sort of seeing what the outcomes are. And you'll eventually find what works best for that player. I've had people that putt great just thinking about visualizing the entry point. I've had people putt great or players putt great just looking at intention. And I've had more analytical, linear type thinkers that want to know where they're trying to aim exactly, right? So it's like you got to figure that out. So every player is a little bit different, but that's not enough players, in my opinion, whether it's even my tour players, a lot of times don't practice that kind of stuff enough. They just sit there and
Yeah.
roll putts. They either go in or they don't. And I don't think that's really a good recipe for putting performance, increasing putting performance. I think you have to have some awareness of like what the ball is actually doing. I call it the 11 or the 7 seconds of reflection. It's like when that ball leaves the putter, figure out, where did that thing stop? Where did it start? How much curve was there? What was the outcome? That way you're not going down the rabbit hole of going, oh, it's my stroke. My stroke is shit. It's not,
Yeah.
it's a lot less of that. And there's start line issues. I mean, again, I use Sam Putt Lab daily I'm working on trying to get people to square it up and start it in the right place more consistently. That is not what I'm saying. It's not important, but I think the low hanging fruit lies in the touch and the picture stuff.
Yeah, I really like that, what you're talking about there, because I think that's the pure definition of developing a skill. When you look
100%.
at that and you're giving them the platform, the opportunity to start learning it themselves. You're not, forcing them into, okay, well, you got to aim here, you got to aim on this, you're actually saying, okay, well, I'm going to lay out the picture, lay out the canvas for you. You just tell me what you see. And
Yeah.
okay, let's add a little piece here. Let's take a little piece away there. And you start, go back to what you said at the very, very start. You were like, if I can get them to understand, if their intention and their understanding and their concepts change. So I know I've been through that process and, I remember being in Stevie Sweeney's studio and, he's like, hit a putt here. And I'm like, okay, I'll aim there. And he goes, right, you're aiming 50 feet left. And where do you think this is going to break? And I was way off. And, and I'm a good putter. So it didn't really bother to me. But my concept, my visual of how I saw everything was completely arseways, right? So,
Yeah.
when we're getting those club golfers, and for me, from my perspective, what you mentioned, the 3 putt avoidance is probably the number one question I get asked at a putting session is, hey, I just 3 putt a lot and it's my stroke. Like, well, can you read greens? I'm not great. Okay, well, how do
They
we
all
do?
think they're better than they are too.
Yeah. So how do we develop that skill? And that's a really, really great way of doing it. So if you're a club golfer listening, just get out some poker chips, start putting down just some random place on the green. And then once you put to that poker chip and you start hitting that poker chip, where would you put the hole? Maybe about a foot back from that poker chip. Where would you have that hole that if the ball hit the poker chip, it would run through the hole in the middle of the hole? I think it's definitely a fun way of looking at it. In terms of the feel and the pace, is there any of your favorite go-to drills for players working on that? Are you, more of that, hey, I want you to learn what 5, 10, 15, 20 feet feels like at your home course? Or
Hmm.
are you not totally Bryson X, or are you more, what, I want you creating, I know on the stack system, there's nearly a 20 putt system where they're all variable, right? There's a 4 foot downhill or left to right and 10
Hmm.
foot uphill or right to left. If you have tour players and you're giving them some guidance to work on feel and touch, is it a much more varied layout or is it a little more block entailed?
Yeah, I would say starting with the mechanics of it, what we've figured out, and people that use Sandpot Lab out there already know this, but most of the patterns with the acceleration profile versus the speed is the poor putters tend to over accelerate. Now, again, you can say that as a blanket statement. Like there's been some over accelerators that putt pretty good, if they're highly skilled, but
Mm-hmm.
I always look deeper into is like, why are they doing that? And the reason is typically the backstroke doesn't change length,
Mm-hmm.
okay, with your average players. So
Yeah.
getting them to comfortably take the putter back faster or longer, which would hope to create a little smoother, more coasting type feeling through impact, is really the mechanical changes that I tend to make when players are struggling with speed or distance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I tons of drills for speed, but I like to basically use variability more than probably blocked. So I'll use just a simple leapfrog drill where we'll set up, a ball mark at 6 feet and a ball mark at 12 feet, and I'll have them hit putts to, try to get it past that first ball mark. And then every putt has to go a little bit farther. So they're having to basically adapt and change the putter speed and ball speed for every putt. If it's short, then you have to start over. Or if it goes past the 12-foot barrier, then you have to start over. So, and you can do that backwards as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
use a lot of those, and I'll use a sort of a different version of the poker chip drill too. Is I will throw out 3 poker chips in like different level or different locations of the green, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
have them set up and hit them with very little time in between each putt. So they have to sort of adapt really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get to sit there and read it and look at it or whatever. I just want them to hit it and I want them to look at the outcome. Then I want to turn and hit the middle one, and then turn and hit to the one up to the right. So I think adaptability is a lot of what's overlooked, I think, in putting as well. Yeah, just a lot of stuff like that. And I'll have them hit downhill and uphill putts where I'll have them vary the intention, like whether it's 6 inches past, a foot past, or 3 foot past, using a ghost hole, to where they've got to decide. Again, all we're trying to do is one, you have to, going back to the intent, is like you have to have an intent on how far you want this ball to roll,
Hmm.
and then marry that up with whatever break there is, right? Because there's multiple solutions to every putt problem,
Yeah.
especially when we're dealing with breaking putts, right? There's a
Yeah.
big cone of variability and options that we have there, right? So if you decide that you're trying to hit it firmer, then you got to play a lower line, right? I mean, that's an option. It's not bad.
Hmm.
I mean, we bring three putt avoidance maybe into it, but I mean, getting people to just think through that part of it is why touch is so important. Like if you can get your touch down and then start to have a decent idea of, predicting slope and predicting break, I mean, the stroke is not that hard.
Yeah.
It's
You're
like the
halfway there
rest
to
of it's,
not three
yeah,
putting. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to have a perfect stroke. I'd rather be a better green reader and have an average stroke than have like a perfect stroke and can't read a green. Think
Yeah,
about
and I know,
that.
yeah, I know Sasho came out a couple of years ago with some data in terms of the influence of path versus face aim and impact. And the face aim and impact, I think, was 92, 93%. The path was maybe two or three. It was very minimal
Yeah,
compared to the
right.
belief that's out there of the influence of it. Um, we mentioned setup earlier on in the full game and using the force plates to look at pressure. Is there anything in setup for putting that you see is prevalent among club golfers where you see them going wrong? Pressure obviously not being as influential because there's not as much
Mm,
movement, but
yeah, it
I
can
know
be.
I know eye orientation gets discussed quite a lot in terms of being
Hmm.
inside the line, outside the line, and that's more of a personal how people see things because we all see things differently in arcs. Is there anything that jumps out to you? You know what? I'm always looking at that. Like, is something even as simple as ball position, where do you feel that should be located to get that if you're looking for that more upward strike?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we all have preferences, right? But again,
Mm,
we like to back those preferences up with data. And if we're just again going like reverse engineering the problem, one of the, if you think ball roll is important, which I think it is, my guy Will McGirt on the PGA Tour, it's like he thinks that's the most important thing in putting is getting the ball to roll in end over end. Now,
mhm.
from a teacher standpoint, I'm like, there's a lot more to that, but having a proper launch and having good roll is important, right? So what you're alluding to there is we want to have enough rise where the putter. I've not coached any good putter that hits down on the ball yet. That's one of the things you can kind of go and eliminate some of the things that just don't happen for good putters. They don't hit
Yeah.
down on the ball, so they're all hitting up on it, which means that the ball position needs to be somewhere in the forward half of the stance.
Mm,
I think every player is going to be a little bit different, but I try to get through a lot of testing and just basically figuring it out through a lot of putts is figuring out where their ball position needs to be in order for them to aim it properly and also to get that launch condition. And then I'll measure every player is a little bit different, but I'll measure my players from their left big toe to the golf ball,
hmm.
whatever that is. And then I'll measure from their left big toe, sideways to get their ball position. So when they go and set up their calibration station, like Will's a 10-inch 4-inch. So he
Yeah.
has a little mark on his alignment stick to where when he goes to practice, he puts down 10-4 and he sets himself up every single time.
Love that.
That's one of the things that I think even good players can get off a little bit. I think he
Hmm.
had gotten too far from the ball a couple of years ago, and I got him a little closer, and I'm like, we figured out exactly where he needed to be and where he putted the best, and then we just measured it with
Yeah.
a tape. So but having the ball forward in stance is important because we're trying to basically we're measuring loft versus rise, right? So
Mm.
we have to have enough rise angle to hit up on it slightly, but we also don't want to be adding loft to the putter. So we want more rise than there is effective loft of the putter at impact that creates what what we call top spin roll on Sam Putt Lab. So yeah, some forward
What
half is
launch
good.
roughly are you looking for when you're looking at players? Maybe 2 degrees or something around that, or is
Yeah, two to three-ish. I mean,
okay.
I honestly don't even look at that number as much as I just want to see what the ball does, right? So
Okay.
um, and it's easy. Like, I just look at the top spin versus new. I mean, neutral's okay.
Hmm.
A lot of times that's the one thing on Sam Putt Lab that I might question sometimes. So I'll even get on the ground with an iPhone and a camera and like put it down on the ground and watch the ball come off. Like I don't have Quintic. That would be like the ultimate, like if you wanted to really see what the
They
ball
do
was
have an app
doing.
now. I'll give it a
I know,
little
yeah,
plug.
that
Yeah.
I saw that. I need to
Yeah.
probably get on that. That would be the ultimate if you have Sam and you got Quintic, so you wouldn't miss
It's
anything.
like the
But
TrackMan and quad of the pudding world.
right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, it's just, I mean, somewhere forward. I mean, if I start a newer, like a new golfer or just an average golfer, I'll start with like a putter head, measuring a putter head from their left or their front big toe,
Mhm.
the middle, towards the middle of their stance. That's a good place to start because that puts you a few inches ahead of center.
Beautiful.
And then you can kind of adjust based on
Yeah.
whatever. Because if you move it back more, then they're going to tend to aim more right. If you move it
Yeah.
forward more, they tend to aim left. So you got to kind of figure that out. And then as far as like the eye position, again, it's a preference, but it's also there's some function behind it. I like to see the eyes generally on the inside edge of the ball. I would not,
Mhm.
I don't like to see it on the middle or the outside, primarily because like, aside from somebody with just a super long torso, then the arms tend to get trapped in their sides. They don't have enough room. So one of the big things with my setup keys is I want the arms to be able to be in front of their body.
Okay.
They can be connected, but I want them to be in front of the body so they can swing freely. So I find if they get too close to it because their eyes are trying to get over the ball or they mistakenly get outside the ball, now they're jammed up and they're a little bit trapped. And then
Interesting.
little bad things happen. Yep.
Yeah. I really, really like it's something I've done previously for chipping is creating little just putting kind of tape on alignment sticks. Okay, where's the best place? And not even if it's the best place, but just that you're doing the same thing again and again. So every time, as you said, you go practicing your putting, just put two sticks down. You're hitting it from the same spot every single
Yeah.
time.
It's simple, right? I
What's
mean,
the
it seems like
one
it.
word everybody says to us when they get on the range? I want to be more consistent.
Consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take the consistency and do it in the learning.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of variability because again, one of those questions, hey, just can't take my range game to the golf course. I'm like, well, you're looking at it completely the wrong way. You should be replicating what happens on the golf course on the range because that's what we
Mm.
really want to do, right? So we need to create that variability on our practice and our learning that we encounter on the golf course. So that's why I like what you said there about the variability of it, creating as much, challenge the player how they adapt to certain situations. And
Yeah.
there's a time and a place for block stuff, obviously, but my
No,
preference is for a little bit
100%.
of
That's
that.
what I said.
Yeah.
I mean, with my skill buckets, I always say, maximum 10 to 15 minutes in that station.
Mm.
Don't sit there for an hour.
Yeah.
You can
And
get
then
it through the
change it up.
gate, and then, yeah, but it's more of like it calibrates the stroke and
Hmm.
also gives them confidence that, okay, yeah, my start line stuff's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to like what's the meat of my practice, which should be your touch and your picture stuff.
Fantastic. All right. Let's get into the nitty gritty.
I'm about to open up another seltzer here.
Okay. We won't judge you.
Let's get in it.
Um, the presentation next week, you're going to get into a little bit more of the putting side of things. Do you want to delve into that a little bit more? Or another
No,
question
let's talk full swing
okay, right.
and short game.
Yeah, so the short game thing I wanted to get into, just very, very, just get your thoughts on it, right? Because I know you're friends with Joe and you're friends with James and
Hmm.
a lot of those guys. And, you know, I think everybody's coming to the place now where they're just like, this isn't for everybody and this isn't for everybody. And you just find what works for you as a player. When you're looking at that in terms of players and working with your tour guys, are you teaching them to have that low spinner shot in their arsenal and then another baseline chip shot? Or are you trending more towards having them, hey, be a little bit more steep or a little bit more shallow? Or third option, does it just depend on who the hell's in front of you?
I think as Joe would say, it's tough to argue with the math,
Hmm.
right? So if you're measuring your guys when they're doing chip shots, patterns start to emerge,
Right.
right? So I haven't hit anybody that chips it very good hitting two down.
Okay.
And see a lot of fat shots, a lot of thin shots when that happens. And I haven't seen anybody chip it too poorly when they're like above six.
Okay.
Okay. So that's just the math of
It's just
that.
what you've seen. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's like I've measured thousands of chip shots, right?
Hmm.
And we can talk about if we were going to throw videos up with Will or
Yeah.
whoever, and stuff that we've worked on because that's a good story because it's
Hmm.
basically that. Um, Now, yeah, the person in front of you is important. I mean, I teach this stuff to my average golfers and my members,
Hmm.
and I see the same stuff, same things. But I think that the important thing is how to like create that pattern of that strike, right? And we can get
Yeah.
into the technical specific. It's not just telling somebody to get steeper. They don't know how to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Very
Okay. They
true.
have to know how, they have to know the pieces that create that steepness. Or I haven't seen anybody that's too steep, honestly. That's one thing. But I mean, my guys chip it really good. I don't have anybody that's 15 down, but my guys chip it good somewhere in between like 6, 7, and 10.
Hmm.
So kind of in between probably the two variances of what we're seeing on Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, but there's different shots, right? And that's the back to your original question is, yeah, I'd say 75% of my guys' short game diet is that 30-degree launch, 27 to 30-degree launch
Yeah.
shot that we've been talking about, the low spinning shot. And then you have to be able to have some variability from that to hit the higher shots. You're going to be probably a little bit shallower most of the
Hmm.
time, right? Because you're
Yeah.
changing some stuff with wrist angles and club face. Not necessarily, but again, you got to have. So yeah, they have a multitude of shots
Hmm.
that they can go to. But I think once you learn to control contact and you learn to control trajectory and spin, I mean, what else is there, right? Then it's
Yeah.
just a matter of, making it go farther and shorter. So does that answer the question to
Yeah.
get
No,
things going? I
absolutely.
mean, yeah, the
Yeah.
answer is that we don't teach the one shot.
Yes.
And Joe, even I talked to Joe at the RSM last week and he was showing me, we actually played with one of his players in the practice round, me and Will,
Mhm.
and he was showing me they was hitting a high soft shot.
Yeah.
He's like, see, I don't just teach low spinning shots, right? We all teach what's necessary based on the situation and the environment.
Yeah, I think what you said there, sometimes it can get a little bit lost in translation in terms of the information. So I was fortunate
Sure.
enough, as we both know, to spend some time with Joe when he was here in Toronto, and definitely having that chance to actually chat to him, show him my thoughts, my concepts, him demonstrate, cleared it all up for me, right? So it kind of made the Chinese into English for me, and I was able to understand it a little bit better. And then I had the tools, as you said, the pieces to make it all work. By
Yeah.
the way, we didn't just work on low spinners, we did other shots too. So you're right.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so what are those pieces? So club golfers have been exposed to this information now, spin loft, hit down on it, create, okay, well, I want 45 dynamic. I want about a 30-degree launch. All right, so to do that, I got to
Hmm.
hit down on it. I need shaft lean. What are the pieces in your mind that if a club player went tomorrow and wanted to go, you know what, I want to try and explore that shot. What are the pieces they need to be putting in to get those numbers happening?
Yeah, let's just say we've got what I would call like a stock shot, right? You've
Hmm.
got a
Yeah.
reasonable amount of green to work with. You're at a relatively flattish surface, like what I usually start my club golfers on just to see where they're at, right? So it's 30, 25, 30 yards, right?
Hmm.
Nothing too fancy. Setup wise, I like the feet pretty narrow. I do enjoy a little bit of foot flare, toes out just a little bit, which helps rotation. Um, you can explore a little bit with ball position. Definitely don't want it forward. I see a lot of average golfers that play it way too far up, so
Okay.
they have a tough time hitting ball first, and they hit behind it. So middle to even slightly back is something
Okay.
that I've kind of changed a little bit of my thinking, that I think have helped. Um, how you line up your upper body versus the center of your pelvis is pretty big. You don't want a ton for a right-handed golfer, you don't want a ton of right bend. So I
Okay.
almost feel like they're actually left bending a touch towards target, which basically gets their spine pretty vertical,
So I feel
right?
like that lead shoulder is a little bit lower than the
Little
trail
bit
shoulder.
lower, yeah,
Okay.
maybe you're
Or
just,
level.
just leaning. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Kind of level-ish, right? So you're kind of setting them up for success. Now, depending on how tight the grass is, if it's a super tight lie, I would say
Hmm.
something I've learned from Ridyard is like the scarier the lie, the more I want the handle of the club up.
Yeah.
Okay,
So when
so I don't want.
Joe talks about VSP, that's an
Right, it
influence of
sets
that.
it a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, you can still roll it inside from there, right? I mean, but you still got to teach
Everything's
them how to
possible.
swing it, right? So it doesn't, it's not an absolute that's going to create a steeper VSP, but we're again setting them up for success. So I
Yeah.
like most of the time. I mean, even Will tell you this is I'll tell him to get the handle up and I'll show him the video and like it doesn't look like it's that far up, right? It's
Yeah.
just if you're going to get a little more owner deviation of the lead wrist. I just like to get the club flat, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not talking about heel off the ground stuff.
Okay.
right?
Right.
So it's just get the club flat, just get the toe from sticking up in the air, which takes a lot of the turf interaction problems out of a lot of folks, right? Plus,
Hmm.
again, with a lot of radial deviation in the left wrist, things can get a little squirrely, I think, a lot of times in chipping,
Hmm.
depending on the
I would
shot, right? We're
agree.
just talking about baseline stuff here. So I do like a little bit of pressure in the left heel as opposed to the toes, going back to that setup stuff, which allows for a little bit easier rotation. Um, if we go into the backstroke, again, I don't like the club getting too far inside, getting behind the player. I really don't care if the face is too open or too closed. It's sort of, I always explain just kind of your normal takeaway that you would make in your full golf swing. Um,
So if we're
I mean,
looking down the line of the golfer, we don't really want to
yeah,
see that club head get behind their pocket, basically in the
well,
backswing.
behind the handle, really,
Yeah.
honestly, yeah. I mean, a little bit's fine. Like, but
Okay.
again, it you can chip it okay from there, but then you got to get it back out in front of you at some point and get it around
Hmm.
the corner. So it just makes it a little more work for the player.
Yeah.
Um, and again, depending on how long the swing needs to be, the club's going to go up a little more in the backstroke. There's going to be some hinge, not a ton, right? I mean, just a little club head above the hands. You can do it a couple different ways there. But for the most part, just a little bit of rotation. I do. One thing that we might differ, me and Joe, a little bit, we talked about this a little bit last week, is I don't really prefer the trail arm to stay straight in the backstroke. I like the trail arm to bend a little bit and fold because I think that's a big proponent in how we control the arc height in the downstroke. Because if it's too long in the backstroke, I think you've sort of maxed out your width, if you can kind of visualize that,
Yeah.
which makes it a little tougher for you to get the club out of the ground on the forward side. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I prefer that right elbow to fold a little bit as the club hinges up. And then in the downstroke, this is where the sequence, I focus a lot on the sequence, is in chipping or let's say short game shots, the pelvis and the torso are basically going to be one unit. Okay, there's
Hmm.
not going to be a whole lot of separation.
Okay.
So to kind of think of that as like the first horse. The second horse would be like your left arm. The third horse would be your hands, and the fourth horse would be the club head, right? So we want them sort of transitioning in that order where the torso and the hips go first, sort of add some stretch to the chest and that lead arm.
Okay.
I like that right, the trail elbow to stay at this pretty much the same bend ish. It's going to straighten a little bit in the downswing, but
Okay.
again, the best way to kind of control that arc height, we're talking about the bottom of the circle getting too much into the ground.
Yeah.
Again, when we talk about steeps and shallows, this is important to probably mention is one, it would be the shape of the swing, right? So the club coming in a little bit more on the target line
Yeah.
would be a steepening piece. Okay.
Hmm.
And again, good players can do it. I think average golfers, it can get a little dangerous when that sweet spot kicks out too soon. I've seen a lot of shanks happen from there, but or good players can kind of manage that pretty well because they have much more um, better mechanics on the front side. And the steep and shallow piece is the wrist angles and shaft lean or non-existent shaft lean at impact. So
Okay.
those are your two factors really when you're talking about steepening or shallowing the AOA. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when it comes down again, this is where I've kind of changed my tune a little bit as well. Is like I used to think I want to get that sweet spot lined up with the hand path and not let it kick out too soon. I'll let it kick out a lot sooner now in say P5 and 6
Okay.
for the teachers out there because that is going to help me to get the club down and get the steepening angle a little bit steeper if that's what we need.
Okay.
And then I think what the point of how do we get steeper and then not take a divot is where a lot of people get lost in translation, right? It's like, how do you do that? Well, they learn to push with the lead foot. As Joe said, just stand up, right? And that's great if you can just tell somebody to do that. My guy, my guy's like, oh, how do I do that, right? How do I
Yeah.
just stand? There's a way to stand up and there's a way to not stand up. So I teach people to basically, again, the sequence has to be correct. You've got to start using your lead foot, your lead hip, and then that lead lat to basically stand up and rotate So you use your verticals and your AP force to get the club out of the ground. We do that by maintain and also maintaining shaft lean, right? That's the thing that confuses people, I think, out there. They think if I have a ton of shaft lean, I'm gonna hit it heavy. And they're not. As long as they get the handle moving up and left. Okay, there's another thing that I've sort of changed my tune on. I used to always have my guys hitting like draws in chipping. Now it's like if you need them to be steeper, you need to have more of a cut pattern, I
Okay.
think, right? Because that gets the
Yeah.
club kind of kicking out, going
Yeah.
left. But I really focus on the movement of the handle of the golf club, right? Because if people try to lean the shaft a lot of times, I don't know if people watch this on YouTube, but they're leaning
Yeah.
the shaft and then the hands are going out to the ball. That's not what we want. We want
Okay.
the handle to go up and left.
Right.
Right. So part of that's the pivot stuff. We just talked about the standing up, turning, and using the verticals, but also it's a good awareness of like, how should the club move?
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't go down the line. It doesn't go at the target. It goes left.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like it's kind
Yeah.
of like, talking about that truck pulling out of the pit stop on the motorway, right? The cabin goes first and then pulls the trailer out. So same, if I get that handle going left, it's going to get
Yeah.
that club
The
moving the
club
same
head kicks,
direction.
right. The
Yeah.
club head's still going towards the floor
Yeah.
as the handle's going up and left. And that's what creates, and then, again, I'm trying to get players to hit the ball first.
Yeah.
Simple as that, right? And then you go in through all the math stuff with the spin loft and the angle of attack and then the launch angles. Like, I mean, all I know is I got a 60-degree tool and I'm trying to launch it. I'm trying to deliver 45 degrees of loft into the ball.
Yeah.
Where's that 15 degrees coming from? It's
Yeah.
not just friction. It's not just contact. It's some of that,
Yeah. A little bit.
a little bit. Yeah. To get that thing to launch at
Yeah.
28, like you better have some forward shaft lean.
Yeah.
If you're dumping your wrist angles, I mean, you can be swinging to the right, swinging to the left. You're going to suck. I think you're going to have a tough time
How
hitting
much
hitting it solid.
how much lateral kind of sway towards target do we need in that backswing? Because if we're going to stand up, right, and we have that kind of elevation and that
Yeah,
extension, we would prefer maybe to be a couple of inches on in front of golf ball, maybe a top of chipping swing, if that's the best way of describing it. Or can we
yes,
be fairly neutral? Because if we stand up from fairly neutral, we're probably going to dump it a little bit early.
good. That's a good point. That's one of the things I just forgot to mention was the center of mass of the body
Hmm.
moving towards target is the final sort of piece, is steepening piece, but also controlling low point piece,
Hmm.
right? And you've got, in my opinion, you got two options. You can do it early in the backswing, or you can do it in transition. I prefer in transition just because I've found that when I try to get my guys to go towards target in the backstroke, a lot of times that can bleed over into their full swing and it
Yeah.
can be a problem, right? So that's just me. And I know you can do either one, but one way or another, you've got to get your upper body translating towards target
Hmm.
as you strike, before you strike the ball and through impact, because that really, really helps to control, where we touch the ground.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far wrong because I remember hearing Victor talk about maybe a year and a half ago, but saying when they first started doing this with those pitch shots, he felt
Yeah.
it just creeping into his full swing.
Right.
And that was a big problem with how he moves and how he organizes the club in full swing. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's obviously there's a lot of pieces to this to make it all work. But the one thing that, Joe's been very adamant about is low point and having that low point moved in front of the golf ball. And you can still be steep in terms of the delivery just as long as that low point's in front of the golf ball, and steep doesn't necessarily mean taking divots. So again, just kind of going through these little pieces and putting them all together. And I think what you kind of referred to a little bit there, and again, if club golfers are still listening, I think it's important to nearly look at
We've lost them
it.
all.
We've lost them all. They're gone. Um, what's a steepener and what's a shallower? And what
Yeah.
we mean by that is, okay, what steepens the delivery of the club head into the golf ball and what shallows or flattens the club head delivery. And you got to organize this stuff yourself and look at your chipping action and go,
Yeah.
right, how much of which do I have here?
Yeah.
Does everything in my swing shallow it out and flatten it out? Well, that's not good. So I got to add in some steepeners, and then you got to go find those. And if you can kind of look at it a little bit that way, like a little jigsaw puzzle,
Yeah.
sometimes I found that can help players in assembling stuff. So, since we're on the subject, let's have a little look here, and we're gonna
Yeah,
go.
that's exactly, and as you pull it up, like that's exactly what I talked to with Will talk about too with Will is Will always thought steep was a bad thing.
Yeah.
before we started working together, and he was super shallow. So yeah, in his we kind of do opposite things in his short game and his full swing.
Yeah, so
All
we're just
right.
gonna have we just brought it up on screen there for
Oh, there
anybody
you go.
still
Yeah.
listening. So we got Will up here, and we've got a down the line and a face on, and the down line on the left. This is a post you put up on Instagram, and I've just transferred the data numbers that you posted up. So we got
Hmm.
angle of attack -10, dynamic loft 44. We got that vertical SP we mentioned, which is about 75, which is absolutely fine. And we got that launch at
Yep.
29. So we got all the numbers that we want to do. So if we were kind of looking, and we'll just play this video, and both of these swings are going to move at the same time. But if we just
Yeah, and
have a
those are
look,
different swings, by the way, obviously.
absolutely, yeah. I
Different
think
short game areas.
the one on the right hand side is more of a floaty kind of a higher shot, I think. But
Yeah.
if we're looking on the left hand side, the down the line perspective first, you talked about, and I think it's probably one of the more important things, where that club gets located in backswing. And so if we
Yep.
just bring him back and just kind of stop around here, it's a fairly lengthy swing in terms of what he's doing. But if we
Yeah,
stop,
he always talks about how he can't, when I show it to him on video, he can't believe how long the backswing is. He's like
mhm,
always trying to shorten it, but it's kind of like what we talk about in putting is if you shorten it too much, then you get over accelerated on the downswing and you get out of sequence. So I don't mind it
okay,
being a little longer because
all
then it
right.
allows him to do his body stuff.
Okay, so if anything, allow him to actually get it a little bit longer than what he's doing. So
Yeah.
when you're kind of then, okay, well, that's a good position to be in. So as he works down, we're kind of getting rid of this for the moment.
Yeah. So this is where we've really worked hard in the last probably 8 months to the year
Okay.
is in the downswing, the club head tends to want to drop a little bit too much behind his hands.
Okay.
See, that's pretty good right there. Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
what I'm talking about as far as like getting the sweet spot lined up with the hand path earlier. So
Yeah.
it kicks out in front of it a little bit. So it kicks out a little earlier coming down is he gets a little bit inside coming
So
down. And
he
that's when
gets
he
a little
gets
bit in here. Yeah.
right. Because he's
Okay.
never had a ton of shaft lean. So we've
Hmm.
never really, I'm not going to try to get him to lean it more. So that
Okay.
would kind of take that off the table. So we've got to make sure that the club kicks out. And he feels like his big feels here is he's going to push really hard with his left foot and he's going to rip the handle off the club and left.
Oh wow. Yeah. So he's really
See
pulling
how
it
it
around
goes
the
left?
corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the big thing we're working on
Okay.
now. It's his scrambling stats have gone way up since we've worked together the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. The other thing is him, if you look on the to the right, run it
Yeah.
back a little bit, notice his upper body translating a little more forward. See, that's pretty neutral for him. So I actually
Yeah.
now, and this is an
Because
old video.
you can see him going a little bit there with
Yeah, he tips
just
back a little bit.
yeah.
So
But
if you looked
from
at the
there.
the stuff that we did last week at like RSM, you'll see
Mhm.
his head actually move a little more towards target in transition, and he gets a lot more on top of the left side. So he can get like as steep as he wants to get, and it just gets better and better and better. Because he kind of runs in there probably 7 to 10 with his AOA. Like he doesn't
Mhm.
get super steep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when he chips at his best. And that's kind of going back to like, figuring out what your player how it performs the best. But we still get that window that we're looking for. He can hit the low spinner, he can hit the high one, he can hit the in-between windows, whenever he wants.
And you can definitely see that on the right hand side, the face on, that pulling up of the handle as he moves
Oh,
around the
heck yeah.
corner. Yeah.
Yep. That's a big
I
thing we work
love
on.
I love the rotation through the golf ball with the
Hmm.
body, the pivot, the head, the
Yeah.
neck, the eyes,
But see,
that
here's the
real
thing. He's not
free.
trying to rotate. He's
Yeah.
basically pushing up with his lead side. So that vertical force creates
Hmm.
the rotation that he's looking for.
Okay. And it's set up happy with everything that he does. It's set up.
Still would like to handle up a little bit more there. It's still a
Okay.
little low for my taste.
Okay.
Like I said, when he feels like the handle's way up, it doesn't look that much different on video.
Yeah.
But especially because this is our short game areas at this point in the year have a lot of grass on it.
Yeah.
So like at tour events and that grass is much tighter. I
Hmm.
want his handle up more, and I'll even have him open the face a little bit more as well.
Hmm. Because he likes to really pronate those forearms around the way through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
what's the one thing he does really, really well in this action that if players were looking to take something from this, right? And we've talked a little bit about what you guys are
Yeah.
working on, but what's his superpower when it comes to this stuff?
I think it's just getting that lead side to rotate
Okay.
and then getting the handle to go left.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Because that's something that a lot of average golfers don't hear a lot. And that's
Yeah.
why how many times have you given chipping lessons and the player shows up and they're ripping it inside and then their hands go out and then they keep going out through strike and they hit it in the hosel 10 times in a row.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get them to like stand up and rip the handle left, then the sweet spot lines up much
That's what I
better.
really like there, where he's kind of got mid hands point,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
like
and
neutral
it,
in my opinion, right? I
yeah, and then
don't
it's
now he's
moving,
kicking it out
yeah, it's
more.
moving up from there where we see with a lot of club players from that position, you would see where the hands go down, right? The hands would keep going down, but
Well,
that's
the bad combination is when they get steep, like vertically coming down, the club
yeah,
kicks out too early because their wrist angles have come out early, and then the hands go straight down the line.
yeah,
That's when you get the shank,
the double whammy.
the double whammy, yeah, the double negative. So it's not like they're too steep as far as like again, like
Okay,
understanding, forward shaft lean is like huge.
so let's look at we got one of your guys over here.
Oh, this guy's the best chipper in the game right here.
So
Unbelievable. This is Brian Campbell.
there's Brian Campbell. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about Brian in terms of what he's done this year, the achievements, etc. But I just like this to look at this because it's like a slightly different action in
Hmm.
terms of what he does with the club head on the way down. So if we kind of just grab this a little bit, and I know it's moving a little bit faster, but very much outside the hands on the way back.
Yeah.
And now there's that little loop, that little shadowing mechanism on the way
Yeah.
down, which is, when you look at that, you would first say, all right, well, that's, a little bit shallow. And we got a bunker game,
Hmm.
our bunker shot here too, to have a look at. And we can kind of see the same thing. And, the interesting conversation around this would be when we look at Brian's full swing, we see a similar kind of pattern. He does
It's the
something.
same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Does
exactly.
the same thing. Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, and I think we have the stats there, but he's been remarkable this year. He's for those who don't know, Brian just got secured his PGA Tour card by way of Corn Ferry Tour this year,
Hmm.
and he rocketed up greens in regulation and scrambling. I think he went from 50s, 70s in both departments into top 10 basically. So what have you guys been working on in terms of the short game stuff with him that's helped him develop so well?
Yeah. So he would be totally opposite of Will. Like he doesn't need and doesn't really ask for a lot of technical help. Like I'll give
Okay.
him some of that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot more, I'd say, call performance training, where I'll
Okay.
just have him like, okay, hit this window, hit this shot, cut this one, draw this one. Like he's a very, I mean, lack of a better term, a feel player, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of knows his feels. And I'm more of like I'm there as sort of a filter to go, all right, this is not good and this is why, if
Mm-hmm.
he has questions. But he's great at like varying his height, trajectory, spin. So this would be a high shot. That's why he
Yeah.
looks shallower coming down.
Mm-hmm.
When he hits a low shot, that club never gets behind him. He can hit, and he's got a very kind of quickish tempo as well. Like it's a different cadence than like your normal player. This guy, when he played in the U.S. Open this year, he got it up and down 9 times his last round at Pinehurst number two. I mean, it's just it's stupid. He's so good, and he knows how to basically control his golf ball so well. But I mean, yeah, this stuff kind of looks a lot like his full swing pattern,
Yeah.
which I think a bunker shot really is. Anyways, I don't try to change that.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I remember Pete
Yeah,
Count saying to me, hey, if you want to work on full stuff, just work on bunker shots too. It kind of
yeah, it's
it
not. Yeah,
replicates. So
exactly.
so he gets quite open, and again, hey, we talk about intention at the start. What's he trying to
Hmm.
do here? Hit that high flopper. So, but he gets a little bit open with that rib cage, that left knee,
Hmm.
that left hip. Is that something you like to see a little bit more with club players? And I know there's been a trend to go back to a little bit more neutral. I always like to see players. You mentioned the lead foot flare earlier on that you like to see. So I always like to see players with a little bit more open body and chip shots, especially club golfers. Is that something you like to see? Or are you happy with players being a little bit
Honestly,
square?
I don't. Yeah, I like to keep them pretty square, and I
Okay.
just like to add a little foot flare. I don't really like them because again, you can get over the average golfers, they can kick it out and swing left too much
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have control over the sweet spot and the wrist
Yeah.
angles like the good player does. So I try to get them pretty neutral, um, and pretty square, I guess, with their heels.
And in terms of what we're seeing in the bunker action,
Yeah,
like a
it's
lot of
just a
what he
full
does here.
swing, right? It's just, I
Yeah.
mean, he's stacked a lot more on his left side.
Yeah.
Um, it's actually a drill that we've done in the last year when he's actually gotten healthy. For his story, when he came out of college, great player, really good amateur player. Got his tour card right out of school.
Hmm.
Lost his card after the first year, and then he got hurt. So he had a wrist, kind of left arm, left shoulder injury that kind of progressed. We've worked together for this is our third year finishing up, I think.
Okay.
And this is the first year, last year was the first year he's actually been healthy. But one of the things that he would do, like that he kind of came up with to test his left wrist was he'd hit bunker shots. He hit buried
Hmm.
live bunker shots. He wanted to slam that club in the ground.
Okay.
So he liked to take more divots with his wedges just to kind of like feel confident that it's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
Kind of a different mindset.
All right. So we're gonna move on and have a look, since we're talking about
Hmm.
him anyway, have a look
Yeah.
at this full swing. And again, what a great achievement. You must be delighted, and the whole team must be delighted getting on to getting the card secured for next season. So
Oh yeah.
um, I know he's done some amazing things, and I think he had I think 8 top 20 finishes this year on Corn Ferry, 2 runners up. So he nearly got that win. But again,
Yeah.
great things for next year. So what mainly have you guys been working on with the full swing?
Yeah. So again, with his, and I'm not sure when this was taken. I have to kind of look back,
I
but
think there's
I've
about
got some before and
three.
afters.
Yeah.
When he first, I think it was at the end of last season, because he was a bubble boy last year. He
Hmm.
finished 75th and just barely made it to where he retained his card, which is amazing.
Okay.
So before, and when he had the wrist injury, it's kind of tough to understand. But I was like, describe what you're feeling. And he said, basically, if you clenched your fist as hard as you can for about
Hmm.
20 seconds and everything on your left side tightened up, that's basically what he felt like when he played the last 2 years. I'm
Jesus.
like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So through impact, because again, he was always my thought as a teacher is I'm like, all right, how can we take some pressure off the wrist? So
Yeah.
taking back there, yeah. So he's always been pretty vertical in the backswing, which I don't mind.
Hmm.
But initially, when we first started working together, I'm like, let's kind of explore the underload pattern a little bit to see if that takes some of the pressure off the wrist. So
Yeah.
this is him feeling like he's underloading it, which is not as much hinge.
Okay.
You can see it definitely. This is probably maybe a 3/4
Yeah,
swing,
just a
but
little three-quarter swing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's always kind of slots it down, and he always loved to hit fades, right? He hated to hit the ball left
Okay.
and didn't draw it much, but he's changed that this year a little bit to where he can go both ways. But if you look at the downswing, they're taking back into the backswing again for me.
Yeah.
That hadn't changed a whole lot. Like so, we've kind of left the backswing alone, letting it be steep feeling. The only thing we
Okay.
want to feel is basically his left pec and his left arm feeling connected.
Okay.
And this is a 3/4 shot. His backswing's much longer than that. But if you look at his left arm in the downswing, see how it kind of looks a little Ricky Fowler-ish, right? So
Yeah.
very bent. And I think a lot of that is because of the lack of feeling in his left arm.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is probably maybe a little bit later, but when we started working together this past year at the beginning of the season, before he went on the road,
Yeah.
when I saw that he could actually keep that left arm connected and his left forearm would actually pronate, I
Mm.
knew that he was going to play good
Okay.
because he could never do that before his injury.
And how'd you guys work on that? Was there like a couple of things underneath between
Uh,
the left tricep and the
yeah,
pec,
we did
or?
some. I'd put like put like a noodle under there a little
Hmm.
bit. But more, like I said, it's a lot of the sessions that we do is so much very performance based. Like we'll sit
Okay.
there and go, all right, the tree on our range, you've seen, you can see
Yes.
that in the distance there. We'll set up something or we'll set up a TrackMan test and be like, all right, there's the pin. This is, you got to curve it around that tree.
Hmm.
Don't let it finish. Don't let it finish to the right, or
Yeah.
and then you got to draw it around the tree. Don't let it finish over here. It's a lot of that kind of stuff that he loves and he kind of thrives on. So it's very, very non-technical, I would say, to believe it or not, of like how we work together. He's one of the smartest, probably the highest golf IQ players I've ever worked with,
Wow.
just from a mental side. I mean, he's just
Yeah.
got so much self-belief. Um, he for an example, at the end of the season, like he's not a very long hitter, never really tried to be a long hitter. We've never chased distance. I mean,
Okay.
he can smoke it if he wants. So he's got another gear, but
Yeah.
he'd almost rather hit like a little bleeding cut out in the middle of the fairway and then take his chances, which I think is why his greens and regulation went back up.
Yeah.
So we had a little part, share kind of a cool story. We had a little party for him a month or so ago after he got off tour, celebrating him going back to the PGA Tour. And one of the members asked him the question is like, what did you learn from being on tour right out of college, and how are you going to apply that to now being back on tour? And I thought his answer was brilliant. I wish I would have recorded it. He said, I finally, when I went on tour before, it's kind of a very common story, probably, where you start looking at other players on tour and you think maybe I got to be more like this guy, or I got to chase distance, or I got to hit it farther, or I got to hit a certain shot shape. He
Mhm.
goes, I finally figured out I just have to play Brian Campbell golf. I got to be the smartest guy on the course. I got to basically play within my limitations, and I just got to be me. And I thought that was so good,
Perfect.
because I mean
Yeah.
he's one of the best wedge players I've ever seen. He's a great putter. He's got one of the most linear strokes. Like, he does a lot of stuff that I don't really my out of my preferences, but
Yeah.
man, it's like, why do we test our players? If you see something that's a little funky out there, if it's functional, it's repeatable, don't change it.
Yeah.
Don't
100%.
change
Like,
it, right? Be smart enough not to change it because it doesn't look or fit into your mold. But he's such a good dude. He's a super competitor. Like, nothing bothers him. I mean, he's got probably one of the highest bounce back stats on tour because he can just shrug off a double bogey and just go and make six birdies in a row.
yeah.
But I mean, he plays with it himself. He knows he's going to hit a lot of fairways. He's going to lay up on most par fives,
Mhm.
going to wedge it in there, and he's going to make putts. And yeah, I mean, it's a shame he didn't win this year. We had a four-shot lead at Bogota and lost in a playoff. But I mean, I think he's going to have it. I don't think he'll ever get off the tour now. As long as he stays healthy,
It'll be
he's
good.
gonna do well.
That's the one really interesting thing I like. And when we have a look at Will and one of your other players too, we'll see those things. And that's the one thing I wanted to get you on here was there's these little idiosyncratic things. I think there is those things with every tour player, but just we're presented with the top 10 and what is how JT does it and Rory does it. So even little things like with Brian here as he's working down in between, like kind of say, as he works down between like P5, P6, you can see that
Mm-hmm.
face in terms of what we would be told, relatively speaking, is a little open at that point, but it doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
because he just knows where impact is and he knows how to get it there.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so it doesn't matter.
and it's kind of interesting because again, he used to. I mean, it was always fade, 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 and then he started hitting more draws throughout the season, especially off the tee,
Hmm.
just to pick up a little bit. But he can go both ways. But one of the big things you can kind of see on the right screen there is we have worked a lot on using his verticals and pushing up and rotating, which I was hoping it would clean up that left arm position. Because even he always kind of cringed when he saw his left arm bend at impact. He's like, "How do I fix that?" I'm like, "Man,
Every club golfer is
you
listening
gotta
is going,
push."
yeah, me too, me too.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, I go like, you got to push sooner. You got to push harder with your
Yeah,
lead side. And that kind of helped clean it up. But yeah, that looks better. I don't think that's probably the one. I use a couple of shots in my
this,
presentation
yeah, I think
that
this is from 4 or 5 months ago in terms, but yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you can see that lead femur doesn't really rotate a whole bunch, kind of
Right.
keeps a little flex at that lead knee, and that's probably
But
as you
again, it's
said,
him trying
yeah,
to hit a fade too, right? So
yeah,
if it probably would look a little different if he's trying to hit a different ball shape.
yeah,
That's probably a
absolutely.
little bleeding cut. And his cuts are like, I mean, they ain't curving much. Trust me. It's
they're
like
they're
it's
not
on
our
a rope.
cuts.
It's a rope, man. It's like just falls to the right. But yeah. So
Exciting,
this one's way
but
more interesting.
exciting times for him, eh?
Oh, 100%.
Exciting times for the team. All right,
Yep.
so we're gonna have a look at Will now. So Will, I think is I would catalog him in the Jim Pure kind of aesthetics thing, right? Where you're
Sure.
if you didn't know who he was and you didn't know the amount of reasons dollars wise why he's on tour because he's such a fucking great player, you would
Yeah.
look at it and go, "Oh man, I don't know if I like what I see here," right? So we'll just play it through a little bit for people watching and we'll just kind of get him up top of backswing. We have a driver swing on the left hand side and an iron swing on the right hand side. And as we get up top here, we're going to see a couple of things that, for a lot of club golfers, they would be told not to do. Number one is the
Yeah.
hand depth. So we don't have a lot of hand depth up top there. We got the hands.
Zero.
Yeah, right. If we drew a line from the hands just for those, it would probably maybe hit maybe in around the front toe or the front of the shoe.
Hmm.
We got that trail elbow. The forearm is nearly parallel to the ground. That trail
Yep.
elbow
Super
flying.
internal right shoulder.
Yeah, a little Eamon Darcy-ish kind of motion up
Hmm.
there up top.
Yep.
You did
Wide
so
open
well.
club face.
Wide open club face.
Yep.
but he wins, and he shoots
Yeah.
scores, and he had a good finish. We were talking about our RSM last week. You were out there at Sea Island in Georgia.
Hmm.
Had a good finish there. 4 rounds played. So, what do you work on with Will? And from a coaching perspective, for the coaches listening, you rock up. Will McGirt stands up, hits one in front of you, and goes, "I'm not happy with how I'm hitting it." And you look, and I don't care who you are, the very first thing you're going to see as a golf coach is the things that we just mentioned. How hard was it for you to not do those things? And I know the story behind it a little bit. I'm going to get you to tell the story a little bit again. And why he is still with you was one of those reasons. How hard
Yeah.
was it to look at those things and go, whatever you do, don't change that, don't change that, don't change that?
Yeah. So, all right, let's start from the beginning, right? If we have
Hmm.
time, because it's a good
Absolutely.
story, and I've learned a ton from working with Will. I've learned how to be a better tour coach working with what we consider an unusual golf swing, which I think is still think it's the coolest swing on tour.
Hmm.
Um, so the first time that I saw him, and I'd seen him swing before,
And just to show people.
we knew each other. Yeah, we knew each other prior.
Hmm.
We first officially started working, and he's like, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, one, I would never change your backswing," which I think he kind of liked because his trail shoulder doesn't rotate, whether that be externally.
Externally, yeah.
Yeah, externally very, very well. So he's got some
Hmm.
limitations. He's had two left hip surgeries in the last 5 years. Um, so we've got a few limitations to kind of work with there or work around. And he wants to draw the ball, right? So you got to think of, it's always starts with an intent and it starts with a goal. So if you remember the picture that those listeners are actually viewing,
Hmm.
the two trees that are in the middle of our range. This is him on the golf course. I said, what do we need to do to make you successful? And he said, if you can teach me how to hit it lower than those trees on the right, there you go. It would be the trees on the right from my bay. We're out on the range
Hmm.
with Brian here. And if
Yeah.
you can teach me how to hook it around those trees on the left, I feel like I can win again on tour.
Yeah.
And I tell that story to my average golfers and my members all the time because
Hmm.
everybody shows up on your list and you go, oh, I just want to hit it straight. He wants to curve it more. Why do you think that's important? And I was asking, they're like, I don't know. It's like, because if you can curve it, you can control your golf ball.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the lead in, right? So I'm thinking, all right, this is me from the teaching perspective is like, how do I not change his backswing and build that pattern of hitting big draws?
Yeah.
So when I first started working with him, he was very kind of zeroed out with his club path. Ball was kind of going straight up in the air and
Hmm.
floating and not curving at all. And he hated it. Like he hates when the ball goes straight. So the first thing that I do in that situation is I look at how he's moving, how his pivot is moving.
Hmm.
So if we had a face on view back 3 years ago or whatever, when we first started working together, he would get super stacked on his left side. So his upper body would kind of translate forward in his backswing. So he was very much
Nearly
on his.
like nearly like the chipping action we were talking about
Yeah,
beforehand.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is where it
Yeah.
gets kind of confusing when we start working on chipping and full swing. So we don't want
Okay.
to do that in the full swing. So
Yeah.
he would get super stacked on his left side. Early transition because he was trying to clear his hips. Would He
Hmm.
would kick the club out and the club would come down super vertical, and his upper body would open up way too early, which would kind of it's great if you're trying to hit cuts,
Yeah.
but not really good if we're trying to hit draws. So
Yeah.
the club would come in super vertical. He could never get the club behind his hands. And so that's where we started. So
Okay.
the first thing we did was I wanted him, so we had to get his pivot better. We had to put draw
Hmm.
pieces into his pivot. So I literally wanted him basically his hips would actually reverse as well. If you can kind of imagine if you had a line up the side of his right leg and his
Yeah.
right hip would move towards target super early in the backswing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we got everything going towards target,
Yeah.
nowhere to go. So the first thing we worked on was basically feeling like we're pushing from our left foot hard, moving our pelvis hard into our right foot as far as he could go.
Okay.
And then turning his upper body sort of behind the ball, for lack of a
Yeah.
better explanation. Right. So I wanted his upper body to feel like he had more spine tilt to the right. more of a
Hmm.
draw, more loaded position. And that was not too difficult. And we did work on one little backswing thing, but we'll get that to that in a little bit at one point. But the transition piece was the biggest aha moment for us to kind of get the club again shallowed out. So we're on TrackMan all the time, right? So we're trying to get that path as far right as we can get it, getting the ball hooking.
Hmm.
So what we did early on was basically feel like as he's transitioning, as it's coming out of the top, I want I want him moving pressure into his lead side, but I don't want him to let his lower body open up too soon. So
Okay.
yeah, his right hip kind of kicks forward a little bit there,
Yeah.
coming down. So we're trying to basically keep our right hip back as long as possible
Hmm.
to allow for time for his hand path to drop and the club to fall more
Okay.
behind him.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the biggest piece. And this is good for average golfers too. If you're trying to draw the ball,
Yeah.
most people open up too soon and the club swings across the ball. So we spent a ton of time like in his feeling in this scenario is he feels like he's pushing down into his right heel super hard in the downswing, almost like a squat feel.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
Yeah.
he can always feel like when he starts jumping off his right foot too early, he knows his hips are opening up too soon.
Yeah.
So this is like the first year that we worked together to
Okay.
where we could get to where literally, if you watch this work, if he wasn't getting it six to the right with his path, he wasn't happy because he
Okay.
knew once he got under competition, six became two.
Yeah. It would reverse back a little bit.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And he's trying to hit cuts occasionally. He can hit a cut, no problem. But again, our stock shot 90% of the time is going to be a draw.
Hmm.
All right. So that's the big that those are the big pieces. Now, learning to
So
flight it, we did mess a little bit with his lead wrist. Again, I get the
that's what I was gonna
questions like,
say.
how does he
Yeah.
square the face, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's always done this super well. So the top of his backswing, when it comes out of the top, that lead wrist starts to flex super early, which
Yeah.
all good players do,
Hmm.
right? I didn't have to teach him how to do that. Now, I had to teach him how to do that a little bit earlier if he was trying to hit a knockdown shot,
Okay.
right? Because we wanted a little more shaft lean.
Hmm.
But the challenge is if you're trying to flight it, what's going to happen? You're going to tend to translate more towards target with your upper body and get on top
Yeah.
of it, right? So that's a conflicting piece of our goal, which is hitting bigger draws.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of abandoned that a little bit. Now, fast forward to just the last year. Now, stop it right there. So you see how where his club head's coming out in the exit plane?
Yeah.
That's that's what we're trying to avoid. That's way too high.
Okay. So
Okay.
up here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's way too high for him. So I know that that's going to tend to happen because we're trying to drop it in. We're trying to draw it a little bit
Yeah.
more. But this is the point I want to make to coaches out there. And all PGA Tour coaches know this, but this is good for maybe young coaches that are going to teach tour players. Listen to your player. Okay. And this is what I've learned from Will because he knows, again, all I'm trying to do is pick his brain of like, what were your feels in 2016 when you were your best? Okay. So the things he's told me is I feel like I'm hitting my best when the club exits lower, okay, through post impact and into that exit plane. So that
Hmm.
club would come out a little bit below his. Now think about that because we're trying to shallow the club, so we're lowering it more in the downswing, and then we've got to exit it more left. Now, why is that important? Because for him, that's his squaring the face piece. Okay,
Ah. Okay.
I don't want him trying to bow his left wrist or trying to roll his forearms more. He's got to do it more with his body, and he has to do it when the handle exits lower, the face squares up. That just happens for him. Okay. So this is the cool thing. It kind of happened last week, and this was hopefully we can carry this into next season. Is yes, we're trying to stay closed longer to shallow the club, and we've worked on that 1,000 times, and he's got it. Okay.
Hmm.
But I still have to consider his left hip being what it is. Like it'll pop sometimes. Like in the practice round, it actually popped. It's not hurting him, but I mean, it's just a weird deal. So I'm still trying to protect his body.
Hmm.
And also I'm trying to get the club to exit left. So we're working at RSM on Monday. This is kind of the cool stuff. And this is where I kind of learn, like sometimes it doesn't make sense, but then you just kind of learn from it and move on. he goes, Pro, I played my best when I actually dropped my left foot back off the target line and played from an open stance. Now, theoretically, that didn't make any sense to me when we first started working together. I would never in a million years have done that because I thought now he's going to swing more left.
Yeah.
Okay. All of a sudden, we started messing around with the drill, and he'll probably, if he ever listens to this, he'll laugh because I had him close his stance one time because we were trying to stay closed longer. And
Yeah,
he
it makes
goes,
sense.
yeah, yeah, of course. And then he goes, well, I'm gonna open my stance because this feels really good. And just absolutely started flushing it, started flighting it the way we wanted, coming out of the nice window, drawing it. And he felt that exit feel that he's been looking for.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, he's been playing on tour for 14 years. He knows what his good swings feel like.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, shit, that's it. That's the final piece. And he's looking, he's like, this is unbelievable how good this is. So he was top 30 in ball striking last week. If we could have putted at all, we would have finished top 10.
Hmm.
But again, that's just me. And it's funny because when we first started working together, we were just talking about other coaches or whatever. And he said, he goes, one of the things that Butch Harmon told me one time is like, all I got to make sure you listen to your tour player. Now, a lot of times they can get confused with feels and you have to like, it's not everything, but
Yeah.
it's something that I probably wouldn't have done 10 years ago. I would have probably pushed back on it and go, no, there's no way that's going to work. You see what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that's the point. That's the learning moment there. And I think that's why we work so well together because he would probably tell you, because I know he sent me some other tour players and whatnot. And he goes, why do you work with Jason? He goes, one, he'll tell me why. Like,
Hmm.
and the reason why we're doing this, and this is, he wants to know the why. Like, he can be very, very technical. He's a very smart, very intelligent golfer.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows the golf swing.
Yeah.
So that's where like, we have great dialogue because I'm like, yeah, I can get that. But then he's like, okay, what happened there? And I'll explain it to him. He goes, okay, that makes sense. This is what I felt. So it's me and
Hmm.
him going back and forth on what he feels as the player and then what I'm imparting as the information. And then that's how we sort of get to these conclusions a lot of times. But I would have never in a million years put him in that stance unless he
Hmm.
would have told me this is where I used to play.
Yeah. So you kind of started off with the whole process with, hey, what do you want to achieve out of this? Okay, I want to hit it. I want
Yeah.
to hook it around that tree and I want to keep it lower than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your own head, then you're thinking, right, what do I need the club and the path? And okay, I need all that stuff to happen at impact. All right, how can we get that organized? What's he really good at?
100%.
And then
Yeah.
what do we change? Because
That's the
straight off the
puzzle.
bat, if he goes, I want to draw it, but I want to stand with an open stance, you're like, well, that doesn't make
No chance.
sense.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
have I would have definitely pushed back on that one
Yeah, as much as you're
early
going to
on.
have like
Yeah.
the angle of attack down, pushing the path a little bit right, it's still hard to manage those
But he's
pieces.
learned, yeah, but he's learned
Yeah,
how to sequence the downswing nicely now because that's what I told. He's like, "How does this
yeah,
work?" And I'm like, "Well, we've worked so hard on shot in the club, you don't have to worry about that anymore. That's
yeah.
ingrained. This is going to help finish it off, which is getting your left hip cleared so it doesn't hurt, getting the torso going, getting the handle going left so you can square the face. Because when the handle goes down the line too much, when it's more
Hmm.
like I call a neutral hand path, the face stays open, the ball doesn't draw. So he'll get the path right, but then the ball hangs out there and he just goes nuts. So that's
So
where I say,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we figured out that the handle left rotation piece is what squares the face up, gets it left of the path, and he can still draw it.
So, what numbers is he looking at in terms of swing direction and path when he's looking to do what he wants to do?
Well, I mean, like the path, like again, when we're practicing, if we're just like working on feels,
Yeah.
we're trying to get it to like 4 to 6.
Okay. Right.
And then knowing, and he'll tell you this, knowing that he'll play it like 2 or 3,
Yeah.
but can
Yeah.
work, can sling it if he needs to. And then the other thing with his wedges is like he likes to be able to flick those wedges down. So we want that draw with a kind of a low trajectory. So we used to do a lot of off speed stuff
Hmm.
where I would have him hit 8 irons 100 yards,
Yeah.
which would drive him crazy. And he would try to hit his 100-yard club like 50 yards with a full swing. We did a lot
Hmm.
of that kind of training, a lot of deep practice, as I would call it,
Yeah.
so he could kind of ingrain the feel, especially. And then we've used a tons of bands. Like I'll put the band on his shoulder and under his feet. I'll hook bands into his belt and like jerk him the other direction. Like anything for him to like create an opposite feel, he really responds to nicely.
And you
But
know,
look at that coming down. Like they said, all the backswing
pretty
stuff,
damn good.
it's unbelievable, right? How good it
I
is from
just
like
should have started
five
off
to
with the video from
seven.
there. I
Yeah,
just gone,
it's
okay,
like it's
yeah.
unreal.
Yeah. Were you at any stage, and I noticed I kind of heard this discussed between tour coaches sometimes, or kind of more elite coaches would mention about other coaches is sometimes coaches are afraid to make changes. They're afraid to rock the boat and, and
Hmm.
lose their tour player. How did you deal with that with this guy? And you're kind of like, like were you because you started at the start of this podcast where you're, I won that award and a little bit of imposter syndrome. Well, this is the ultimate challenge for that, really, isn't it? It's such an
Yeah.
idiosyncratic swing that you're standing there going, all right, everything's an ecosystem, so anything I do here is going to affect everything else. So I got to be right. Were you okay with possibly making mistakes and just be very open with him and go, let's just try this? Or were you, what, before I say anything to him, I'm going to investigate the hell out of every single thing I'm going to do? Or were you just, what, I trust myself. I know what I'm doing here.
I trusted myself. Yeah, I think I've done it for long enough to where I was. It's weird. It's kind of like I saw beauty in what he was doing because
Yeah.
it was kind of funky in spots, but then beautiful in others. And I don't know, it just came together in my head to where I like, okay, it was very clear what I needed to do
Yeah.
for whatever reason. I'm like, I got to slow his torso down. I got to make time. Like, I understand the sequence of what kind of needs to happen,
Hmm.
regardless of where that club is at the top. And he'll even say, like, one of the first times we met, like, I'm not going to mess with your top of your backswing. He goes, good, because that's all I got. I've made over, $11 million with that backswing. I don't think we need to mess with it.
Yeah.
The
He
one
knows where impact
time,
is.
well, yeah, it's not even, and plus he's drawn it in the past. It's
Yeah.
not like we were trying to get into a different pattern.
Hmm.
Um, what I typically do with a player, and usually they're coming to you, they're struggling, is I always ask them like, what were your feels when you played your best?
Hmm.
That a lot of times they forgot, right?
Yeah.
That's the cool thing is when we will get on a good session, he'll be like, I feel like I'm back in 2016 again. This is as good as I've
Yeah.
hit it. And that was one of our moments last week. That's why I was like so disappointed we couldn't figure the putter out. But and he's normally a great putter. But yeah, it's so cool to be able to kind of put those pieces together and like develop a pattern that works. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at him coming down there, it's like it's as good as it gets,
Oh, it's so good at impact too.
right? Yeah, it's amazing. We did the only time I've ever worked with his backswing as far as like his hands and arms. Occasionally
Hmm.
his hand path will drift. Like if you look at it like right from the takeaway, take him back to address. Like his first, like from one to three, he's pretty conventional. His
Yeah.
hands are
So
going to move.
he's got that ball significantly out of heel
Oh yeah,
itself
that's
too. Yeah.
another thing. Everybody on Instagram says, "Oh, why does he address the ball?" Hold on a second. So why does he address the ball out of the hosel or whatever? He
Yeah.
goes, that's how he perceives the sweet spot. That's
Okay.
his answer to that. Like he said, well, I guess one of his old coaches tried to get him to line it up, and he like missed 6 cuts in a row, and they quit doing that pretty quick. So again, it's like I don't care, leave it alone. But I mean,
Yeah.
his takeaway, watch, his hands are going to move in, his left arm's going to move in,
Yeah.
which I really like.
Yeah. I think
So
it's beautiful. It's
stop right
lovely
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So occasionally his hands will move a little straight going back,
Hmm.
and he'll have a little tougher time drawing the ball. So we did make sure that the hands are always moving inward
Okay.
at the start, and his trail hip moves back, and he like immediately got the path back to the right, no problem.
He's got a little Cabrera-esque kind of action
Oh
to it at
yeah.
that point. Yeah, I
Oh, it's
like
so
that.
cool, right?
Yeah. I love the trail forearm movement in backswing too. The way he pitches that shaft up. I really, really like that
Yep.
position. So
Yeah.
there's a
Breaks all
lot
the
of good
rules
pieces.
there.
Oh
Yeah.
man, but that's why I love it, right? As a golf coach,
Absolutely.
it's really easy to sit behind Tiger and go, "That's really amazing. That's really good." The
Yeah.
challenge is when you get a player like that in front of you, and if you're ever gonna get it to that top level, you're gonna get a player like that in front of you, and you better know what you're doing with him. In terms of that. So you're gonna get a player like that. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, yeah. Can we take a 5 minute break?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I did yeah, and I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos of
Mhm.
him back in the day too. That was the first thing that a lot of coaches I'm sure will do.
Oh yeah, you went did a little bit of research.
Just give me five. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're good. About the bus. I'm sure you can edit that out, right?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I'll just leave that
You're
in.
expert editing.
Piss
Yeah.
break.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Good.
Yep.
All right. So another one of your players, Keegan Bronberg here. And again, for people watching on YouTube, this is going to be a lot easier than people sitting at home. But let's roll
Yeah.
through this swing and we'll just go and kind of see what you've worked on with Keegan.
So
Um,
when was this taken? That'll be, let's
this
see.
one
I can probably tell
is,
you.
yeah,
Take it
this is
to the
probably,
top and I'll tell you.
okay. I think this is
This
from
is
a little while
another
back.
fascinating. It's not that far. Yeah, it's probably not that long ago.
So what we're looking at here for people listening is player, obviously tour player, great setup, takes the club a little bit outside, a little bit closed. So club head resides somewhere between hands and golf ball at P2, which is shaft parallel. And then that club head gets, or the shaft gets quite a bit steep in backswing, neither good nor bad, and then gets into a great spot up top, um, and good in
Maybe.
transition.
Maybe it's
Now,
not a good spot for him.
yeah, but does get it a little bit. Works it a little bit outside of the body on the way down and great rotation. So opens up a lot through impact. So
Mhm.
again, same principle in terms of obviously what did the player want and what route did you guys take in helping him achieve that?
Yeah. So yeah, Keegan's a great player, mini tour guy. Played at Ball State. Didn't quite make it through Q school. I think he finished pretty close to getting through first stage. Plays G
Hmm.
Pro. A lot of talent. Love working with this kid. Another kind of unusual looking ish swing, which
Hmm.
I think is cool. But again, it's like I think when you work with players, you've got to explore and sort of pay attention to when they play their best
Yeah.
versus when they look their best. Okay. So this is probably not that long ago. We've gone through a pattern of where he struggled a few months ago with his
Okay.
ball striking. And what I found was when he first came to me, we were okay. Let's back up. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
wants to cut the ball. He's a fader.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the first thing, right? So
Yeah.
we're working in the sort of fade pattern,
Hmm.
and he would lift his arms a lot
Okay.
in the backswing, and then he would lay the club off quite a bit at the top,
Okay.
right? So, and I was okay with that. I didn't like the way he was moving, his body was moving early on. It would be cool if we had like before stuff. We were working together for a couple years now, I think, probably 2 years,
Okay.
two
Nice.
seasons. Um, he basically in the backstroke, he didn't turn his hips a whole lot. He would lay the club off, which was fine, but
Hmm.
then he would jump out of his right side super early. Right hip would kick in towards the ball super early, and he would almost get too above plane and get a little wipey. Right. So
Okay.
it's like, and I told him like we want to cut the ball, it's great, but we actually have to shallow it out a little bit and hit sort of what I'd call more shallow cuts
Yeah.
because it would really bleed up into his driver, and his driver would start curving a little too much left to right.
So he would get a
So
little steep on it, a little bit too out. Path would
yeah,
get a
yeah,
little
yeah.
too far left.
So yeah,
Okay.
but this is the point. This is the interesting thing is, and this is where we just started our off-season program a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
So as you start figuring out where your players play your best and where they don't, he does not play well from this position at the top. Even though it looks sexy, looks very lined up, no
Yeah.
good. No
Okay.
good. For whatever reason, when he starts to transition, if the club kicks back a little bit too much and gets not too shallow, but again, he was starting to hit draws, which we were
Okay.
sort of working away from fades just to kind of like exaggerate the pattern. But then he played like shit.
Yeah.
So we're digging back into we do a lot of stuff online and just texting or whatever. And I was like, look, we got to
Okay.
get back to the takeaway. Getting the takeaway was pretty conventional. We got to get you feeling like the club and the center of mass of the club is more behind your hands at the top.
Okay.
Okay. So it'd be cool if you had the newer video, the last session that we did, that club's going to be pointed a lot more left and a lot more laid up the top, kind of like a Daniel Berger look
Okay.
at the
So
top of the backswing.
right, it's
Yeah.
gonna be more out kind of
So
here. Not to that
exactly.
extent, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it'd be pointed more left at the top. We have worked a lot on his pivot to where we're trying to get Again, him not to like jump off his right side quite so soon
Hmm.
to where he can not get super high coming down. But as soon as we got that, then we started getting that ball flight we were looking for again because it makes it easier for him to line the sweet spot up a little bit more
Yeah.
with the hand path coming down from a laid off position. If we
Hmm.
had to like say why did we do it again, this is like that's why I take so many videos of my guys and like sort of document when they're playing well, when they're not playing well, what's the difference, what's the swing look like,
Yeah.
what's the feedback they're giving me. And I like I said, I preference wise, I love where that is at the top.
Oh, it looks
He
like
he's
anybody
not
listening, it's bang on the
right.
money. You couldn't
Oh,
fault it for
it
love nor
looks
money.
amazing.
Yeah.
Can't hit the shot that he wants to hit from there.
But when he gets it, let's
When he
say
gets it
down,
laid off,
yeah,
yeah, if you go back and look at my last Instagram, I think I saw him like 2 weeks ago. Where literally I'm trying to get him to rotate his left forearm more
yeah,
from 3 to 4 or
hmm,
2 to 3, 3 to 4. And I
yeah,
want him, I'm feeling like he's pointing the club so far left at the top of the backswing. And it's
yeah.
not that much, it's just a little bit more.
Because he doesn't
Ball
have a
striking got
lot of
way
rotation
better.
in that forearm early, does he not?
No, not at
No, he
all.
keeps that fairly kind of,
He's going more the
supinated.
other
Yeah,
direction. Yeah. So we're trying to almost feel like we're laid off more and actually the face more open at the top of the backswing.
yeah,
And then all
yeah.
the
Because
pivot
because
stuff that we're
because he when he
kind of
gets it
worked
when
on.
he does this one we're looking at, then the shallowing piece is that forearm rotating because it's moving the opposite of what he's doing in backswing. So you feel if you
Correct.
can get that earlier, he's not going to have that adaptation in transition. Therefore, we can keep that club a little bit more in front.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's weird. Again, it's like sometimes things don't
that's
make sense.
fantastic.
You
No,
just
I think
have
it's
to like
amazing.
figure it out, right?
Yeah,
It's like, and again, it's like I'm not trying to make them look prettier. I want it actually we're trying to make it look uglier because we know it works.
yeah.
I
So
mean,
what's
it's just it's as simple as that.
what type of
And that's
drills were you just basically working on? Hey, do
oh,
you know
I'm
what? I
moving
just
them.
want you to.
I'm in there
Oh, okay.
moving
You're
them.
hands on.
I'm
Okay.
hands on. Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
there moving him to the top. I'm
Yeah.
grabbing his left forearm at this point,
Yeah.
and we use sort of the bucket analogy where you got a range bucket in front of you and you're dumping the
Yeah.
bucket of water over your shoulder.
Yeah. Just
I'm
trying to
having
kind of
him do
get.
a lot of left
Yeah.
arm only back swings
Okay.
where he's literally trying to rotate it and lay it off.
Yeah.
Um,
So he feels that left forearm's pronating on its own because of the weight of the
yep,
golf. Yeah.
yep, and
I
it's
love that.
amazing. Like he's awesome. He's a great kid. And
Yeah.
as soon as we get it, he'll be like, "Yep, that's it, that's it."
He's
It's just
strong too, eh?
oh yeah, he hits
Yeah.
it plenty far. Um, really good putter. I actually first started working with his putting. He came to me for putting, and then ended up coming back for the rest of the game. Chips it really good. I mean, he's gonna be out there.
Yeah.
He's been pro for like 3 years or so, I think.
Oh, okay. So he's still
Yeah, still
he's starting
pretty
his journey.
new. Yeah, he's finished pretty high in a lot of G pros and some
Yeah.
mini tour things, but he can make a lot of birdies. But
Nice.
again, it's just that's one of those odd situations that just I think that's so cool because when you sort of figure it out amongst yourselves, like he's not one to go, oh, this looks really good, and let's play from there. He knows what it feels like. He knows where the club is, and then when that thing starts coming out, you make that sound and you get the ball flight you're after. Then you're like, okay, this is it. This is where we want to be.
So for those coaches, I think this is invaluable, right? Because this is the stuff, right? And when I started learning, you'd go to seminars and online, and you would get, okay, well, this is what you do to do it right. Duh, buh, buh. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to have a
Yeah,
foundation piece. But this is the stuff that you really need to know. This is where it gets into the meat of it, where it goes, you know what? Okay, that is right, but that doesn't work for that guy in front of you. And he has
right.
learned to play an elite game at elite level doing what he does, and you got
So,
to
yeah.
mold those pieces and learning what you do. So it's a culmination, right? That's why it pissed me off so much when we see on Instagram or social media and somebody comments on a swing. I'm like, you have no idea what the
No
player's
idea.
intent, no idea of their physical condition, no idea their mental condition, no idea what their
Yeah.
coaches were, none whatsoever. And people talk shit about it. And it's like, what you just showed there in the last hour is probably the most valuable thing I think we've done on this podcast so far in
I
terms of
hope so.
coaches, in terms of their information. I think they're going to learn a huge amount from that.
Cool. I hope
Yeah,
so. Yeah, it's like you can't like players have to like see going back to the intention in ball flight.
yeah,
Like he started hitting draws and it looked cool, but he didn't know where to aim.
yeah.
Like he would tell me like, yeah, I'm like setting up. I think I'm like set up for a draw. Really, probably more neutral and set up for a cut. And I short side myself. And I'm pissed. And like it just like the picture wasn't matching up with the pattern.
Yeah.
So as soon as we start hitting that, that little fade again, now he can go and, be himself and start to play golf again.
All right, man. I think that was probably the longest podcast we've done. It's
Hey,
like 2 hours.
you know how mine roll. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to split this one up.
Thanks for
Um,
hanging in there with me. Yeah. It's
oh
hopefully
man,
that I get going and
no,
I
that
mean,
was
I get into it.
amazing.
So,
No, it was
good.
class. Thank you so much. So, obviously, club golfers, if you're still if you're still hanging on to this late, I hope you did. Thanks to Jason for helping you all out, and then obviously the coaches. Again, this is just my opinion. You don't have to take it. I think this is probably the most valuable coaching section we've done in this podcast because it's real world practical stuff that you can help you develop your career and develop working with really good players. And I think that's at the end of the day for most golfers, that's what you want, right? You want that real world practical thing, which is fantastic. So thank you so much, my man. We know you've got probably a lot of requests now that you're, such an elite player. Hope you still
Whatever.
talk to me when you're famous and out on tour 30
It's
weeks
all
a year.
downhill from here, brother.
Yeah, we're done now.
No, I
All right,
appreciate you
man.
having me on again, man. It's like hopefully people can hang in there and you probably split it up into two parts. But
Yeah,
I value your friendship and the work that you're doing and putting in. Mad respect for your career, and I'm pretty excited to see where you're going to go as well. So always here to help.
appreciate that. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jason.
My pleasure.